We have a quorum, so we'll just wait for it to hit 5 o'clock.
I know that Harold is doing an update.
He's here.
No, he isn't.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. He's one of the 6. So, yay.
I was all confused. I was like, wow, I'm staring at him. Is it just the facsimile?
I was going to say that sure looks like him. I think we're expecting a couple more people, but 6 will do it, so. Ariana, did Liz Callan get an invitation to the meeting tonight? Okay, great, thanks. Just checking. Okay, I see it's 5 o'clock, so we'll call the Transportation Commission meeting for October 25th, 2023 to order. Ariana, if you could please read the instructions.
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members, if you are able, please activate your video for purposes of quorum and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. All panelists, that is alders and staff, have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists can also rename themselves if they wish to add pronouns after their name. Please do not alter the naming conventions otherwise. Also, please continue to use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the council, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ariana. Scott Briggs is helping us out tonight since Aiden's on vacation. Scott, if you could call a roll, please.
Certainly. So let me just pull up my list. Is Alder Juliana Bennett here? Alder MGR Govinda Rajan?
Here.
Alder Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford?
Present.
Alder Barbara Harrington McKinney? Alder Ann Kovich?
I'm here.
Alder Robbie Weber?
Here, not alder.
Yeah, the rest of us aren't alders.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alder District, I see.
Yep.
And Denise Jess?
She's excused tonight, Scott.
Right. Jose Miguel Barros Hawkins?
I don't see Pepe here yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Darren Wozniewski?
Present.
Christopher T. McCahill?
Here.
Harold Cleans?
Here.
And do I call the alternates? I'm sorry.
Yes, you do. Mm-hmm.
Nikki K. Vandermullen? And William Brummer is excused. And that is the roll.
Okay, thank you so much. And it looks like Alder Harrington McKinney is joining us now. Okay. Did everybody have an opportunity to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Sharon?
I move approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Robbie?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is passed. And do we have any registrants this evening at all?
We do not.
Okay, no registrants. So there's nobody registered to speak under number one. There were a number of emails under number one, including quite a few with regard to one of the intersections, Heathercrest and Midvale. There were 7 emails under number one, and staff is responding to all of those emails. So they're not being ignored. People are being touched base. I believe there's a neighborhood meeting plan for Midvale. That's the project that we approved under the Safe Streets Madison program, but we need to have a public hearing with regard to removing the RP3 parking before it can move forward. So I believe they're planning another neighborhood meeting to discuss that. So we will now move on to item number 2, which is the North-South Bus Rapid Transit. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Czechvala. I have Liz Callan here with me, so I'll go through a PowerPoint. Let me just see if I can bring this up on the screen here. Okay, let me know if anybody can't see that. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about North-South BRT. This is really exciting. I know Metro's had a lot going on. It's all been very exciting. It's all been a lot. So if you remember how big of a deal that it was when we started moving forward on East-West BRT, this is a big deal again. So we're moving forward on North-South Bus Rapid Transit. So this is just a little preview of what we're going to show to the public. I have the dates later in the slides, but we have a handful of public meetings coming up. And so I wanted to get feedback from the commission and let you lay eyes on this before we go out to the public. Okay, so this will be a little bit about the BRT project. Some of this is going to be review for the commission and for others who have been with us through East-West BRT. But this is what we'll show the public. So talking about what is BRT, Liz will talk about why we're pursuing the North-South BRT line, talk a little bit about costs and funding, timeline, and then giving input. So this project is just starting. We're starting the planning phase, and we're starting to lay out some of the very important decisions that will ultimately lead to things like how the North-South BRT line is built, where the stations go, where the bus lanes are, things like that. So what is Bus Rapid Transit? You've all seen probably a similar slide, but the key components of Bus Rapid Transit and why it's not a regular bus are direct routes with fewer stops, frequent all-day service, which we've already implemented on Route B with the transit network redesign, bus-only lanes over part of the route, easy to recognize stations and buses, priority at traffic signals, and longer electric buses, and the faster fare payment, which we're deploying system-wide.
Mike, can I interrupt you for just 1 second? Normally we would go through the presentation, then hear from any members of the public who wish to speak, and then go to questions and discussion. But since we don't have anybody registered tonight, if people have, I assume you'd be okay with, if people have comments as we go, they can just go ahead and raise their hand and we can have discussion. Chris, go ahead.
If we do that, I would really appreciate folks just keeping questions to simple clarifying questions, so that we don't ask questions that Mike's going to answer later. I'd rather.
And that's fine. If people would prefer, we can go all the way through the presentation. Sometimes it's just easier if something's on the screen and you want to ask about it rather than having to go back and find the screen that you were having the question on later on. But I'll leave it up to the group. Would you like to ask questions as we go or wait till the end? Any preference?
since I raised the point, I'll just say I often find it that most of the discussion has happened by the end of the presentation when we do that. And then I've been sitting on things that I don't really feel like weighing in on anymore. So that's just my perspective.
All right, well, why don't we let Mike go through the presentation and then we'll have discussion and questions. Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever you prefer. Hopefully it's so clear that there aren't any questions, but we'll go. So we'll talk a little bit about who's building Bus Rapid Transit. In this one, we will have about 5 stations in the city of Fitchburg. So I think that's kind of an important question to ask. Why is Madison building in Fitchburg? I think for people in Madison, that'll be fairly straightforward. But this project is a City of Madison-led project. We have a number of partners that will be helping us with funding and planning. City of Fitchburg, Dane County has jurisdiction over a part of Fish Hatchery Road. The Greater Madison MPO is providing support. Wisconsin Department of Transportation is providing support and funding for Park Street. And the Federal Transit Administration is, again, supplying the federal capital funding for some of the project. So this is ultimately the part of the build out of the original vision for BRT, which included primarily an east-west and a north-south route. The red line is Route A, which is also the east-west BRT line. So the frequent service for Route A and B were implemented with the transit network redesign. The buses for routes A and B, as well as F and R, will be purchased with the east-west Bus Rapid Transit line. The east-west BRT project is building the running way and stations on Route A, as well as the shared section through downtown and the Isthmus. So the north-south Bus Rapid Transit project is finishing the system by building the running way and stations along Route B, south of UW campus and north of the Milwaukee North Street station. These are stations that are under construction. For the east-west line, our intent is to have basically a continuation of this type of project, building stations that are similar in look and feel to these stations, running way that includes dedicated lanes, some of which will be center running as shown here on High Point and Mineral Point Road on the left. So basically an expansion of the system. This is the map that we'll be showing that shows both the route and the station. So I'll focus on this just for a little bit. This is essentially Route B with a couple of things to note. One is in Fitchburg. The current end of Route B is essentially on Cahill, Maine, and Caddis Bend there, the second to last station. We're proposing to extend the line south one more station to McKee. That kind of finishes the route to the end of the immediately urbanized area. Getting that far really opens up a lot more opportunities for people who live and work on the McKee Road corridor or near it. It opens up some opportunities to extend or transfer to other routes like the 65 and 75. And it gives us a better option for off-street charging and layover space. I think it's just one more station that kind of completes the line. We are proposing to have a slight deviation off of Fish Hatchery Road in that area. So the bus goes off Fish Hatchery onto Caddis Bend and then comes around on Cahill, Maine, and comes back onto Fish Hatchery. That is a slight deviation that'll cost probably a minute or two, but the development in that area is significantly west of that Cahill, Maine station. I think that'll be much more useful to the people who live in Hatchery Hill, and we'll be able to use that as opposed to making them all walk down to Fish Hatchery Road. We've talked about both of those two things with the city of Fitchburg, and they seem supportive of that. The rest of the north-south line is essentially Route B as it currently exists. One other thing that we're just looking at is the north end of the line. Currently, it ends as a one-way loop on Troy, Green, and Northport Drive. There are some challenges with a one-way loop like that. For example, where does the bus stop and lay over in a way that doesn't force people to sit on the bus while it's doing that layover for 10, 15, 20 minutes. So we're looking at some other possible options, but that's what the Route B currently does. That's what we're currently showing as kind of the default option for the end of the line. And so if you'll notice, as we talk about possible changes to the route, we talk about, focus on the ends of the line. That's kind of what we're talking about. The rest of the route we feel has been fairly well established with the transit network redesign. That was a planning process that we went through. We could look at possible adjustments to it if people have ideas or input or other things to consider. But we want to respect that long planning process that had a lot of public input in it that resulted in kind of the core of the north-south BRT line or Route B. We are showing some proposed stations. One of the main things we'll be asking people is where should the stations go? We're going to stress the point that this is a significant input that we'd like input on from the public. We'd like to see if they think that these stations are in the correct locations. Some of them are pretty firm. For example, on Packers Avenue, there are only so many places that we can stop. International and Aberg, we feel, are pretty firm. Aaron Street is the hospital, St. Mary's, so that's pretty much a given. But some of them also could be moved around a little bit. That's what we're looking for input on, so we can firm that up. Now I'll pass it over to Liz, and I can keep running this, Liz, if you want to talk about a little bit more about why we're pursuing the North-South BRT line and some of the benefits.
Yeah, that'd be great. So just a really quick intro. I'm Liz Callan. I am a transportation planner with the City Department of Transportation. I'm new to the city and I'm helping out with this effort. So to kind of talk a little bit more about why expand to the north-south and also just sort of like why BRT, what are the benefits of BRT, kind of reiterating that, because I think a lot of people, may not be familiar, even though the east-west is under construction. But really there's several reasons. And so I'm going to highlight convenience, reliability, comfort, access, environment, economy, and safety. So convenience, the BRT will run throughout the day every 15 minutes from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it'll have convenient features like all-door boarding, fewer delays, and real-time bus arrival information at stations. So this will be the same as the East-West BRT, and the frequency of every 15 minutes will actually be the same as it is with the Route B right now, but with some of these additional features to make it more convenient. Reliability, this is probably one of the biggest benefits of BRT. With dedicated bus lanes and priority at traffic lights, it makes bus service a lot more reliable than traditional fixed route service that has to deal with traffic and different signal issues and things like that. Comfort. So the service is, really improving the quality of the service for riders and making it a lot more comfortable. So some of those features are things like improved stations with shelter, lighting, heat, and seating. So those images that Mike showed of those stations under construction, once those are built out, they will have all these features. Also near level boarding platforms, doors on both sides of the buses, making it just easier, more comfortable to get on and off. You're not waiting in line, queuing at each stop. And then the buses themselves are going to be those modern electric 60-foot buses. So a big part of the North-South BRT, sort of the benefit of this, is that it's going to really expand access to this high-quality transit service to a lot more people in Madison. So it's going to expand access to the diverse people and places that make up the North and South Side neighborhoods, as well as the Fish Hatchery Road corridor in Fitchburg. So as far as, how many people will be within a half a mile of the stations and how many jobs, it's significant, and it's actually right in line with the East-West BRT as far as population. So it's going to actually there are 97,000 people that live within a half a mile of stations along the North-South route, and that is including the central segment. But since that's the full alignment of the route, that's the line that we included in these statistics. But then there's also 78,000 jobs. So both of those numbers are really, really significant when it comes to BRT across the country. And obviously a lot of diversity in both the people and the jobs that this will serve. Within a half mile of the proposed route, there are a lot of different destinations other than jobs. So there's major sports venues, convention centers, 4 hospitals, 6 colleges and universities, or over a dozen grocery stores, pharmacies, lots of schools, parks, childcare facilities. So this is just kind of a highlight reel of those things. But, it's not just about jobs, although that's very important, but it's also going to provide access to all of these other, services and destinations that people want to get to and from. And then we start looking at a little bit more about who is this going to serve. So this particular route is serving a lot of what would be traditionally considered underserved communities. And a lot of people probably already are depending on transit. So in that respect, it's really improving service for people who are already using it on a daily basis. And I think it's also going to attract new users, which is another huge proponent or a huge reason to invest in BRT. But particularly, this corridor has 19,000 car-free households within a half mile of the proposed route, which is actually about 20% of the total population, that's very significant. 6,800 people with disabilities live within a half mile of the route. 33,000 people of color, so about 1 in 3 of the people along the route are people of color within a half a mile. And then the median household income. So this map shows the median household income, but among those, there are 14,000 lower income households. So we're defining that with households that have incomes within 150% of the poverty threshold. But this just kind of gives you an idea of that. And then 6,800 seniors and older adults. And 10,700 people under the age of 18. Benefits to the environment. The BRT will use those battery electric buses that Mike referenced. So the bus on the bottom, the yellow and blue bus, that is, I believe this is the kind of bus that will be used on the system. And then the picture on the top just shows a different kind of electric bus, but it's showing it on an en-route charger. So obviously the electric buses, along with the improvements, are expected to increase ridership, reducing the region's reliance on fossil fuels. And then the economic benefits. So the project is going to direct local and federal investments in Madison's North and South Side. This is going to help the economy and just help catalyze some of the investments that are part of the community vision for these neighborhoods, and also reducing individual transportation costs for families. If transit is more attractive, more reliable, and they can use that and depend on that more than owning a personal automobile, that's going to save them a significant amount of money. And then safety. So a lot of the improvements along the route are going to have significant safety improvement impacts. So things like dedicated bus lanes are going to help calm traffic. And then a shared path that we're looking at along Park Street as well as other walking and biking improvements would really help improve safety along various parts of the route, both on the north and south side. And some of those intersections that we're looking at are large and very, very car oriented. So we're looking at multiple locations where we can make some of those intersections just a lot more human centric, and that could be built in as part of this project.
Thanks, Liz, and I'll go into a little more detail on that later on. But we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the segments of the corridor. So starting on the south side, Fish Hatchery Road was recently rebuilt by Dane County and the city of Fitchburg several years ago. So that will be a retrofit. We'll do a similar thing that we did at Mineral Point, where we'll switch the bus lanes from the right side to the left side, potentially. That's one concept out there, but largely retain those investments that were made on Fish Hatchery Road. Coming into Madison on Badger Road will be in mixed traffic, but we will fit some stations in on Badger Road. Moving into Park Street. Park Street is where it gets a little more interesting. So Park Street is one of the reasons that we did the east-west line first. Park Street needs a full reconstruct between about Badger Road and Fish Hatchery. The pavement is in poor condition. There are many deficiencies with the cross-section. WSDOT was planning on doing some rehabilitation work on Park Street. Park Street is part of US Highway 151. So our plan is to fold that funding from WSDOT into the BRT project and turn it into a full reconstruct. There are benefits in doing that. It maximizes how much federal funding that we can leverage with the project. And of course, it prevents us from building stations and running away and then ultimately having it be torn out with whatever future reconstruct would have otherwise happened. So Park Street is going to be a large part of this project. We're going to look at a couple different cross sections, but that's going to be a full reconstruct with center running bus lanes, as well as improvements for bikes and pedestrians. There's kind of a transition area between Fish Hatchery and West Washington where there will be some significant rebuilding, but we won't have that major reconstruction, full cross-section change, but there will be some changes in that area. And then north of West Washington, again, we're retrofitting into a street that's in relatively good shape. But we do think that we can get a dedicated running way on the majority of Park Street from Badger Road up to close to campus. And then the section in between through the Isthmus on East Washington, there will not be any significant changes there. That's been built out with the east-west line. The buses will stop at the stations. There's really no changes there. Going north of the Milwaukee North Station, will be in mixed traffic on North Street and Commercial, which is that blue line just north of East Washington there. So those are relatively local collector streets. Once we get onto Packers Avenue, we looked at rebuilding the Packers Avenue Aberg interchange into a more conventional intersection. We just don't think that's on the table right now with the funding that we'll have available. That interchange is, for better or worse, in fairly good condition. The bridge has quite a bit of life left to it. So we will be in mixed traffic on that section, and we'll probably use the off and on ramps as we currently do and retrofit stations onto the ramps, but we will make improvements to those ramps to make them better for pedestrians, as well as streamline the bus service through there, be some spot improvements at intersections and that kind of thing. Going north onto Packers and around to Northport, we'll be looking at retrofitting stations and bus lanes into that more or less existing cross section that again was rebuilt. I don't know exactly when, but somewhere in the 2010 timeframe. So that's currently a 3-lane section in each direction. So the goal there would be to reestablish or establish the left lane as bus only, run in the middle of serve center running stations, and retain 2 general purpose lanes. And then going around the loop, Troy Drive, Green Avenue, and Northport Drive, that will likely be in mixed traffic. Like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at some possible alternatives to doing that loop, but as it stands, again, those are fairly local collector streets. Oxymoron, I know, but and then on the Northport Drive, we have 2 lanes in each direction. We probably need 2 lanes, and I think we'll be fine in mixed traffic, so there'll probably be a mixed traffic section on Northport Drive. So here's a cross section of Park Street. This will be one of the biggest changes and one of the things that we'll be talking about quite a bit as it relates to the south side of the line. The before cross section is what it looks like out there through most of the corridor. It's essentially a 2.5 to 3 lane section. There are 2 travel lanes through the length of the corridor. The right lane varies between a bus lane, a parking lane, some combination of bike and parking lane. The width varies a little bit, but it does exist in some form, all the way from Badger Road up to West Washington. So the after cross section is a simplification of what we're hoping to achieve on Park Street. So that auxiliary lane will be moved from the side to the center. It'll become a bus only lane, and it will be continuous through the corridor, providing fast and reliable bus service. We will then widen the sidewalk on the west side from current standard of about 5 feet wide to 8, 9, or 10 feet wide. And that will provide a bike accommodation on the west side of Park Street. We're proposing the west side because there are a few more destinations and things like that on the west side compared to the east side. We'll also widen the terraces to accommodate trees. The terraces along the corridor are currently very narrow. There are basically no trees in the terrace. There are a few trees in the median, which will try to preserve some of the larger, higher quality, healthy trees. So if you notice, I've said the word widen a lot. We're not widening the corridor. So what's happening here is we're trying to fit a lot into this cross section. So there's going to be some give and take. We're going to do a lot of geometric tricks to try to fit all of this in. The median will likely be narrowed through most of it. We're going to do some kind of wig back and forth to provide terraces where we can get them in between the intersections, but then widen the street a little bit at intersections, kind of similar to what was done on East Washington Avenue to get everything we need in at the intersections. So it'll be somewhat of a complex design. We're just kind of looking into that right now. We don't have anything to show currently, but we'll have some preliminary ideas to show if this general concept moves forward as we hope it will. So here's kind of a better rendering of what that will look like in the real world. So as you can see that we retain a 3-lane section, but the left lane becomes bus only. The median becomes narrowed. The median probably will not be grass. The way that's shown is basically impossible for us to maintain. We can't maintain a median that's that narrow with trees or streetlights in it. So, that'll probably be some other type of material. And then you can see the shared use path or the widened sidewalk on the left side, which is the west side of Park Street. So, we can fit all of this within the current right of way, but again, it will take some of those tricks and trade-offs between what we'd optimally like to use in terms of width and what we can really fit. Moving to the north side, this is a little bit simpler. So Northport is the before 3 general purpose lanes, Packers and Northport. The concept is a little bit more simple, just convert the left lane from a general purpose lane to a bus only lane. we do think that the capacity is there within the 2 lanes to handle the traffic volume on Packers and Northport. Again, this cross section will extend to about the Troy Drive intersection. And here's just a streets view with a very simple rendering of that left lane, which will become bus only. Not only will that give us the dedicated lane with the reliability and the constant run times that we hope to achieve with BRT, but we also hope that by concentrating the traffic volumes into fewer lanes, that we'll see some reduction in speeds and a safer facility. Okay, so talking about points of feedback and what we're hoping to achieve out of the upcoming public meetings, we're going to be asking 3 very basic general questions. Is the route correct? As I mentioned, we're focusing largely on the ends of the line. We're hoping to maintain what we've completed with transit network redesign and not try to open all of that. The stations in the right location? Spacing should be about a half a mile for BRT, intended to serve high ridership areas. Pedestrian crossings need to be considered. All of the stations need to be at intersections where people can cross the street, typically at traffic signals. In some cases, there could be some other ways to cross the street, but traffic signals are typically where they are because they're on these major streets. And then running way, we're installing the bus lanes where feasible. So we're going to be trying to kind of confirm that. It's, I don't know that we're going to get too much specific recommendations or thoughts about the bus lanes and where they should be, or, if we should have more or less bus lanes. But we're also expanding that to talk about the other modes that are on the corridor. Looking at the bike facilities, pedestrian facilities, crossings, intersection improvements, all of it. So talking about funding just a little bit, this will be a small starts project, which will provide a significant amount of the funding for these capital improvements. The federal funding can be up to 80%. We're anticipating a 20% local match. That federal funding does include a few other sources besides the Small Starts Grant, but the Small Starts Grant is the lion's share of it. As far as that 20% local match goes, some of it will be provided by the city of Madison. Some of it will be that funding from the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, as I alluded to earlier with the Park Street reconstruction. We do have some tax incremental financing, some TIF districts that will provide funding along the corridor. And the city of Fitchburg is also partnering with us to provide local funding for their share of the running way and stations that are within the city of Fitchburg. Timeline, as I mentioned, we're just now starting the planning, which will lead to the environmental review, preliminary design, and then ultimately final design of the running way and stations. Construction will be in 2026 and 2027, and then planning to open in 2027. I will say this is a pretty optimistic schedule. I think we like to start optimistic, and if things slide, they slide. But we would like to try to achieve this schedule if it's possible. So ultimately, we could have the system complete by the end of 2027. Looking at the more immediate schedule in a little bit more detail, we have the public information meetings coming up at the beginning of November. Those are actually both in the beginning of November. We'll be doing some stakeholder outreach to try to meet people who have a direct connection to the community and can help us really plan and get the information out there and reach the people who will be directly affected by the North-South BRT project. Following that, we'll start preliminary design this year, and then in early 2024. Through that preliminary design, outreach will be ongoing through 2024. We'll have various touch points with the community. These immediate planning activities will lead to the locally preferred alternative, which is a document that we did for the east-west line as well. It's a basic memo or document that establishes kind of these basic parts of the north-south BRT system, basically the route, where the stations are, and a general concept of the mode or running way changes. So, for example, is it center running? Is it side running? Is it bus lanes, mixed traffic? The LPA is a fairly broad document. Some of these things can be adjusted throughout the years, but it is an important milestone to establish basically what we're trying to achieve so that we can have our engineers go in and start designing what we're going to build. There's another milestone that will come up in early 2024. The Federal Transit Administration will release their project ratings. We have submitted the materials to get us into that queue. What we would like to do is achieve a favorable project rating, which is an overall rating of medium or better. That puts us basically in the chute for potential small starts grant. So that's an important milestone in that process. These are the upcoming public meetings we have. The South Side will be at the Urban League on November 1st. That'll be an in-person meeting. On the North Side, we'll meet at Warner Park Community Center. On November 2nd, we'll have a Fitchburg meeting on Thursday, November 9th. That will not be in the Fitchburg Council Chambers. That will be at, Liz, help me out.
That's going to be at the Mainstay Suites Hotel, right off of the route, right off of Route B.
Fish Hatchery. Yep. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Yep. And then we'll have a virtual meeting on Wednesday, November 8th for people who cannot make these in-person meetings. We'll generally talk about the route as a whole, but for example, on the south side, we'll spend a little bit more time talking about the south side. On the north side, we'll spend a little more time talking about the north side. But everybody will basically get the same information. These are some key questions for stakeholders as we meet with key stakeholders along the corridor. What would you like to see from the project? And how would you like to be involved? Basically, we're trying to get people involved in the project so that we can work with them as they'd like to be worked with. And just closing here, we're reusing our website, madisonbrt.com. That will be retooled to be more general about the BRT project, and then you'll be able to go to the east-west line to see what's going on with east-west as the construction moves along, and we have updates there. And then we'll have a separate page for the north-south line that you can go to see some of these planning documents and meetings and so forth. BRT@cityofmadison.com is an email address that we've always had up, but it's been a little bit stagnant as we haven't been doing this kind of planning work for some time. And then we'll have email updates as well. So I think I'll end it there, but we can always go back to other slides if we'd like to.
Thanks, Mike and Liz. Before we go to comments and questions, Ariana, are you there? I see Liz Vandermeulen, one of our TC members, is in the attendees section, and Brent Selby, who is one of the consultants, who's also in the attendee section. They both need to be moved over to panelists, please.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yep. Just move them over.
Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody have questions or comments? Did Nikki get okay? Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I know that you're trying to keep the stations about half-mile apart, but I would urge you to maybe include one at Lakeside and Park, because the area between Park Street and John Nolan Drive really doesn't have transit service. And, going up all the way up to Erin or down to Olin for people who are sort of over towards John Nolan seems like quite a haul. So I'm just going to throw that in there, that maybe we can add one at Lakeside to bridge the gap between Erin and Olin. And I think that that's going to be a pretty heavily developed corridor as well. And maybe there'll be infill, on one side or the other of Park Street as well. So anyway.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that comment. We'll throw that into the mix. Right now, as I understand it, we don't have a stop at Lakeside. We have one at Olin, and then we have one at Fish Hatch, which is just like 1 block north of Lakeside. But so that's basically the local stop in between Erin and Olin. That's not shown as on the map as a BRT line.
Oh,
But yeah,
okay.
thanks for that.
I guess I didn't see one at Fish Hatchery. So
There's not a station proposed. There's a local bus stop there now.
okay, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. Yeah.
Okay, other comments or questions? Or did you have more, Robbie?
No, I guess I just was, if we can go back to the map of the east-west, the north-south, I just wanted to clarify for myself. Yeah, wait.
I've got a better one. Hang on.
Yeah, no, that one right there. So, the solid blue line, that's just the bus that goes out to Middleton. It's not a BRT line, right?
It's kind of a BRT line, and it kind of isn't. It's the routes F and R are the Middleton service, and so F and R2 both go to Middleton. R1 and F both end at Junction Road, but within the BRT corridor along University Avenue, they fill in with Route A to provide that more frequent service along University Avenue. So within University Avenue, they're BRT, but then as they spin off, then they're not really.
Okay, I was just wondering why that line was solid. And
yeah, it's because on that section it is BRT. It uses the bus lanes and the BRT stations, whereas once it leaves that, then it just will stop at local bus stops as it currently does.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Sure. Other comments or questions? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. It is exciting that we're moving faster than we once thought we would. I guess just one question, because I'm sure it's going to come up a bunch. You said on Park Street that the median is going to be too narrow for trees. And I'm just wondering if that's what you meant, and because I know there's pretty small medians with trees on it, and what are the possibilities for getting trees on there? And can we have those conversations with forestry before the public starts asking about it?
Yep. We're looking at those kinds of options. The challenge with having medians with trees in is you really need about a 15-foot wide median so that you can mow around the trees. The city has also struggled with maintenance of grass medians with trees on them. There are a couple large mature trees in the median, so we're definitely trying to work those into the project. And we are having conversations with forestry. Those conversations are going. I see Transportation Director Tom Lynch may have something to add.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was referenced by my full title. It was great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Director Lynch.
We have begun those conversations with forestry. I think the thought is right now, the current terrace on Park Street is perhaps 2 feet, maybe in some places 4 feet, and they can't sustain really canopy trees. If we can expand the terraces to 7 or 9 feet, which is what we're looking at, we can plant trees that are substantial, that actually provide shade. Right now, trees that are in the median, while they're attractive, they just really kind of provide shade to cars, right? Whereas if you can take that and multiply it on the sides, then someone who's on their bicycle or someone who's walking can enjoy that. And so I think we've just decided to, rather than try and get trees everywhere, I think we've decided to go all in on the sides and just get as big a trees as we can on the terraces. Thank you.
Thanks. Great.
Is that all you had, Chris? Okay. All right, Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation. A couple questions. I think on the slide where you showed the cross-section proposed for Packers and Northport, you showed that the existing conditions already have a multi-use path on one side. And that's not really the case.
No, that's not true. There's a part of it where there's a path on the east side of Packers that maybe needs to be updated. That's not. I would say that's the majority of that is not accurate. So yeah, we can update that.
Okay, but the idea would be that going forward, both on Packers and on Northport, there would be this, what I guess we're going to call widened sidewalk again.
I don't know that we know that. Tom, do you know?
We probably would not be able to provide that facility. Northport was reconstructed by the Wisconsin DOT maybe 8 to 10 years ago, and so this is a DOT facility, so our project budget doesn't include reconstruction in Northport. A good portion of Northport does have bicycle lanes, but those are not in all ages and abilities facility. But I probably I'll just be honest, our budget probably would not be able to support that. The reconstruction of Park Street, we estimate it being between $70 and $80 million. So that's pretty significant. And so to kind of double that, and for Northport on a roadway that was reconstructed 8 years ago, I think it might be difficult to justify with our project ratings. But even as it stands right now, our project budget probably isn't sufficient. It's $150 million in the current capital budget, and it's probably not sufficient. So it'd be difficult to add things on. That is a need, though. That's actually a critical need, and so I'm just going to acknowledge what you said is true. So.
But the painted bike lanes on Northport would not go away like they have in other places.
They would not go away.
Yeah, they would stay.
Okay. I mean, it might be worth exploring. I think I know they're narrow and all of that, but I mean, maybe there's something that we can do to harden those to have flex posts or something. And I don't know what the road widths were, so maybe you can explore that as an intermediate term solution. The area near Oscar Mayer, you mentioned that the Abarg intersection. I mean, we want that to change, but it's not going to happen as part of this. I guess I'm just wondering, when we think about station placement, I mean, we don't want to build stations which are a significant cost factor for the BRT project. And then, 10 years from now, when the bridge maybe is no longer as viable, or we get a big grant that would allow us to reconstruct the intersection at grade. I guess just, thinking about how that would interact with where we put the station, and also, of course, Oscar Mayer redevelopment, which I think is going to happen relatively soon now. So I'm curious if you can comment on that, and if you don't have an idea for that yet, I think that's a question that should be asked.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's certainly on our mind. So the retrofits that we would be doing to the ramp would be relatively low cost improvements, such as sharpening the westbound right turn from Aberg onto Packers Avenue. Right now, it's basically a 50-mile-an-hour free flow right turn. So eliminating that so that people have better access to the BRT station, that would allow us to put the BRT station on the far side, which is where it wants to go. Some minor adjustments to the ramp and the intersection to avoid buses sitting in some of the queues that happen at the intersection at the signals without doing too much work to it that would ultimately perhaps be redone at some point in time. As far as the stations go, I think what we would look to do is build stations that are nice and that are compatible with the rest of the stations. But I don't think that we would be able to put them in a location where they would survive a full reconstruction. So if there was a full reconstruction, they would almost certainly move from the sides to the center. I don't think that there would really be any way to somehow put them in a location where they could be used after the ramps were hypothetically removed and redesigned. So we would just like to think about how we put the stations in there so that we're not throwing away too much investment. And if it's 20 years before something like that happens, these things, that's kind of the life cycle of a lot of these types of improvements anyway. So that's the approach that we would take.
Okay, thanks. I'm hopeful that it won't be 20 years, but we will find out, I guess. So you mentioned the north end, which currently has this awkward one-way loop, and you mentioned the challenges with that. I mean, do you have any ideas of what the solution to this is, where you can have charging facilities and still, not have people stuck on the bus? What's the idea there?
There are a couple options. Right now, the end of line layover is at Northport and Sherman. And so what happens is the bus goes up there, it goes northbound, it stops at Northport and Sherman. It goes up, it does the loop, and then it stops at Northport and Sherman and does its layover, and then it comes in. So that means everybody coming in the morning, if you're coming in doing a traditional flow, everybody in the morning coming in would have to wait through that layover. So there are some other options that would work with the loop. One thing we're looking at is somehow finding a space on the far end of the loop, such as at Kennedy and Northport, or somewhere in that area, where if you think about it, around School Road, which is kind of in the middle of the loop, most people could kind of treat that as a one-way couplet, where if you're going southbound, you go up to Northport, and if you're going home and getting off, you just get off on Troy. And between Troy and School and Northport and School, that distance is relatively walkable. So that's what most people would do. There are some other tricks that we've sometimes employed in the past, where we put the layover on the side of the loop that more people are going. So, for example, this is a relatively residential area, so more people are getting on and coming in the morning, and in the afternoon they're more getting off. So what we can do is have it do the loop and then come in the morning, and then in the afternoon we can have it go out, do the loop, and then end. So, for example, if the layover was at Troy and Northport or Sherman and Northport, most, but not all people then would be spared from sitting through that layover. The other options that we were looking at would basically mean having two-way service on Northport and then turning left on Knutson, which is the road at the very top of the loop there, and then doing some kind of turnaround up there, which could be possible. The basic challenge with that is that then Troy Drive and Green Avenue and some of the destinations there would be unserved by transit. We feel like we need some kind of transit there, and so we'd have to find some way to provide service there that could involve the north-south line kind of looping back in on itself, or bringing another route to serve that, such as, just to throw the other two routes that are up there, Route L and Route D2, both go up to the north end. So perhaps one of them could somehow serve that area. But again, that gets really into the weeds, and it becomes very complicated of how to serve that area. So those are the basic trade-offs. I don't know that we'll go into that level of detail at the public meetings, but we'll try to express those challenges.
Okay,
that
thanks.
Makes sense.
I think that I look forward to what you come up with. And I guess it also is a question of like, where do you actually have property and space to put a potential charging terminal and all of that. Did you look at any of like both on the north end and the south end? Are there good potential spots for that?
We have. I'll start on the south end because it's easier if you follow the route. Not this map because it doesn't show that extension, but the end of the line will be essentially at Triverton Pike Drive. And so if we're northbound on Triverton Pike, there's a drainage, a ditch or detention or pond or something. Not a stormwater guy, so I don't know exactly what to call it. I'm probably calling it the wrong thing. But there's some vacant space there that we can use to have an end of line facility, and I think that'll work pretty well. That was one of the reasons for pushing the end of the line south by one station. On the north end, it does get a little more complicated, as you've suggested. That does impact how we can end the line, and that definitely plays into it. I think ideally the end of line charging would be at Kennedy and Northport, but there isn't some magically vacant area that's at where the station would be. There are some areas up there near the railroad tracks and near the Central Wisconsin Center that we could potentially find some land to do that, but it's not really where we typically want a station. So it really gets into some detailed rationale for what we could try to do. We have some options. And ideas, but nothing is really presenting itself as being perfect up there.
Okay, and final one, just about the small starts process. I think you explained some of it, but I'm still a little bit hazy about it. So you said the project evaluation, we're trying to get into the queue and we will actually get the results from that at some point, but that's not like that gives you the project rating that makes you eligible for small starts funding, but it's not the actual funding, which Correct. Then happens when and where and how.
So small starts is very much a process. It's not like a lot of grants where you fill out some paperwork and you hope you get money. It's very much a process. It's a multi-year process in a partnership with the Federal Transit Administration. So this is kind of the first step. You ultimately have two evaluation and ratings. This is the first one where we submit kind of our costs and our ridership, and they give us an evaluation and rating, which we want to be medium or better. That puts us into the queue for funding and gives everybody kind of the confidence that, yes, this is a good chance that this will get funded. Now, ultimately, what that goes into is the FTA publishes a report that goes to a report that recommends us for funding. And then in the spring, the executive budget comes out, which has this list of projects that we hope to be in. So that's what we're currently hoping to achieve.
Okay,
then we work through the environmental assessments and the preliminary and final design, and then we get to where we are right now on East-West BRT, where we get evaluated and rated again. And we do a lot of documentation, and then we actually execute a small starts grant agreement with the FTA, and that's when we get the money.
Okay, that's very helpful. In the locally preferred alternative, we need to have that in order to get the rating.
We don't need it to get the rating, but we need it eventually.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have. Much appreciated.
Harold, Alder Harrington McKinney, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the presentation. Without getting too much into the weeds, what considerations or conversations have you had related to disability access?
So that's some of the outreach that we're planning on doing. We'll be reaching out to some of the organizations that have feelers into the community, and we can kind of get to that. We will be designing all of our stations to be ADA accessible. is I mean, that's a requirement. But we also would like to connect with some of these communities or some of these organizations and stakeholders to understand things like, are the stations in the right place? So that we're not creating barriers that that don't need to exist. As we have fewer stations on the BRT lines, we do want to make sure that we do more planning and more investigation on that than we would typically do for a normal bus line.
Ben Lyman, did you have something to add there?
Yes, I did. Thank you very much. I'm unrelated to my agenda item with you this evening. I'm working on the transit development plan update for Metro and holding focus groups with various community organizations to get to particular populations that we need to hear from. And we're actually going to be holding 2 separate focus groups through Access to Independence, because we really want to target and make sure that we're hearing from a lot of folks in the disability community who have a variety of disabilities. So the first one of those is the 8th of November, and the second will be December 6th. And as part of that, as part of that outreach, because we're already going to have people talking about transit in the room, we are adding some BRT questions at the request of Metro and Department of Transportation to assess station locations and I hope identify barriers and obstacles to accessing those station locations. So
that's great, Ben. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is that all you had, Alder?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Darren, go ahead.
Thank you. Mike, thanks for the presentation. Really interested in Park Street and I know you haven't begun to design that yet, but with it being part of 151, do you have the ability to actually align the design of the street with the posted speed limits rather than it being the take your life in your hands speedway that it is right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's our goal. Our goal is to align the design of the street with a posted speed limit of 25 miles an hour, and so that it actually makes sense to drive that speed. Reducing travel speeds has a very significant positive effect on the number, type, and severity of crashes on a corridor like Park Street. That being said, we do have to work with the Wisconsin DOT. They do have jurisdiction over Park Street, and so we've started some of those conversations. We need to do some traffic modeling and things like that to make sure that their needs are met. But so far, it's looking promising to make some of these changes that we're hoping to make.
Great. Good to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Nikki, go ahead. You need to be unmuted, Nikki.
I'm on a different computer.
There you go. Now? Yep, we can. Great.
I'm thrilled to hear about the disability listening sessions. Is it possible to please share those sessions not only on Metro website, but on the website of the Department of Civil Rights, so that way more people could know, and possibly even a Facebook or Instagram type ad?
Yeah, we can.
If I can weigh in on that, these are actually focus groups where we want to have a discussion with a small group of people and get into more detail. That's what our plan is, that has been approved by this body for our work plan for the transit development plan and by the MPO policy board. It's largely a technical document. Most of it is not really appropriate for large amounts of public outreach. So these are not, public listening sessions. They're small group, no more than 15 people in the room, discussions about particular aspects of service planning and amenities for riders. And they actually, the Access to Independence group had 200 people request to sign up in the first 2 hours they had posted it. So they've now pulled that because we don't have the capacity to to do a focus group, do focus groups with 200 people.
My question is this: how are you going to hear from the entire disability community? Any other way?
Well, I think we have two different listening groups here. So Ben, you're talking about one thing, and Mike and Liz, you're talking about the North-South BRT. So there could be additional outreach, just particularly for the North-South BRT, couldn't there, Liz and Mike and Mick, with regard to the groups that Nikki's talking about?
Yeah, we actually have an ongoing communication with Access to Independence separate from the focus group. So I think that's an option we could certainly bring up and see if they would be interested in co-hosting something with us for specific to the BRT with a broader group.
That would be wonderful. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I'll just add that we are working with the Department of Civil Rights to use the resources that they have. So we check in with them, and they're helping us on this outreach and coordination. So we're using that resource that exists.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That ends all my comments.
Thanks, Nikki. Is there any other comments? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. As we were talking, I was looking at the maps, and you mentioned that Fish Hatchery was just recently reconstructed in Fitchburg. But of course, that, I think, ended before the Beltline crossing. So you still have that stretch like across the Beltline and then to Badger Road. And I'm assuming, there would still be dedicated running way, but we wouldn't make any other changes. Is that right?
It gets a little complicated between Greenway Cross, which is that first intersection south of the Beltline, and Badger Road. So we're not planning a full reconstruction there, but there's what we currently have in mind is some targeted spot improvements that will give us patches of dedicated lanes that are ultimately intended to separate us from the Beltline traffic. So when the Beltline kind of backs up, we don't want to be stuck in that, as we sometimes currently are. And then also just another thing related to that is WSDOT has a Beltline study that they're looking at a number of different possible improvements along the Beltline, which could include things like additional crossings of the Beltline and transit enhancements. And so that project is fairly in preliminary stages, but we've made it clear that our priorities for any transit enhancements along the Beltline are the crossings of the Beltline where the BRT crosses at Fish Hatchery and Mineral Point Road. So if any other opportunities come along from that project, we'll take advantage of them.
Okay, yeah, I think the big other aspect is that it's like a super hostile environment for anybody walking or biking along there, where you have to cross all these slip lanes. There's a super scary painted bike lane. So I get that, yeah, this might be a different project, but I think reminding WSDOT of that and seeing if we can get any improvements would be good there too. Thanks.
Hey, anybody have any other comments or questions on this BRT item? We have another one next on the agenda. Anything else on this one? One last time, any other comments? I'm sure we'll see it back again, right, Mike and Liz?
Yep, we'll see it again. And I should just finish up by saying, so this dovetails into the next item, which Liz will talk about, which is the public participation plan, which goes into perhaps a bit more detail on some of the things that we touched on here. So we wanted to get an indication of if we're headed in the right direction with that. But I can end it there, and thanks for your comments.
Thanks. Liz, you want to go into item 3 then? The North-South Bus Rapid Transit Public Involvement Plan?
Absolutely. I'm just sharing my screen here. Yeah, so I just wanted to give an overview of the public participation plan, and I think we are going to ask you all to approve this or give us feedback on this document, but we are obviously getting ready to go out for public involvement starting next week. So this process is kind of getting started again, as Mike reiterated. We're very early in the process, so kind of as we're developing those first set of meetings, we really wanted to also just kind of look at our public involvement plan and look at, what are the different things that we want to do and how can we kind of like document that, but at the same time allow flexibility. So this document is really a roadmap for the project. It's not meant to be anything set in stone. It's really more of a guide, so we can really kind of have a collaborative process that where we kind of have like these goals that are outlined that we can kind of return to, but the tools and strategies that we're using will, I think, evolve as the project evolves and as we're made aware of different stakeholder groups that we want to engage with, or as those stakeholder groups have different points of feedback or have ideas of how we can better engage with their communities. We're going to kind of react to that. We're going to move through whatever process that looks like. But I think this is really intended to kind of provide that overarching goal and outline some of those strategies with flexibility built in. So I'm just going to kind of page through the document pretty briefly, and then if people have specific questions about anything, I'm happy to answer those. So we provide kind of an overview of the project limits. We don't need to talk about that since we just provided that in the last presentation. Kind of outlining those project partners that we discussed. But really I think the big piece of this document is the goals and strategies for public involvement. So obviously public participation is crucial to this project. I think we're kind of going in with an intent to have a very broad public engagement process here, working with a lot of different stakeholders, working, sort of in the more traditional public meeting setting, working virtually, looking at different ways we can kind of meet people where they are the best way possible. So of course, we're looking at providing clear and transparent information, kind of following, this idea of the 5 R's of meaningful public participation. So kind of bringing that back through all of our interactions with different groups, whether it's a public meeting or kind of one-on-one or organizational presentations, and the materials that we're preparing for those things. Another key component of the outreach for this project is that we really want to ensure that outreach to underserved populations is comprehensive, and not just comprehensive, but we want to ensure the explicit consideration of comments made by those people from those underrepresented communities, because we know that those are probably the groups that are going to be most impacted by changes proposed. So really being diligent about that. We want to ensure our efforts and materials are inclusive. So again, I think someone else mentioned we're working really closely with the Department of Civil Rights as we develop our materials. The majority of the presentation you saw previously went through their what's called plain language review. So really trying to kind of reduce jargon and make it really accessible for people to understand about the process and how they can be engaged with it and what we're really looking at doing here. And then really just, again, engaging that broad group of stakeholders. And of course, meeting those federal requirements that are going to be part of the Small Starts Grant application and things like that. So we looked at, some of you may be familiar with the International Association for Public Participation's IAP2, sort of in parentheses, spectrum of public participation. So this is the idea that, not every public participation process is the same, nor should it be. There's different levels of public participation, and it's a good idea to kind of look at, what you're doing before you go into a process and kind of outline really what is the goal of that participation. Is it public education? Or is it really on one end, or is it really to kind of have a collaborative decision-making process on kind of the other end? So we're sort of looking at this idea of going up to involving public participation. So we're kind of recognizing that there's certain areas with opportunities for the public to really have an impact. Things like the station locations, specific ideas around, hopefully some additional bike ped improvements. But we also kind of want to recognize that we are not able to do everything that that many people in the public are gonna want to see. So it's kind of those are kind of those levels that we're looking at, and trying to kind of frame our approach in that manner. So that this part just kind of talks about that a little bit more. And then breaking down some strategies within those different areas. So I think each of our public participation kind of processes or like rounds of public participation, so we're going out, getting ready to go out right now, kind of includes a little bit of all of this. So, basic informing and education information is certainly going to be a big part of it. But then also trying to get a little bit deeper in some of those like one-on-one stakeholder meetings. We are going to have some community mapping at the public meetings where people can specifically identify where pedestrian and bike improvements are needed. We want to make sure that we're just, being interactive in the way we engage with people, responding to comments, and kind of being able to then go back and follow up with people to let them know, what the outcome of their comments were. And then, as Ben mentioned, doing focus groups, among other things. So again, kind of outlining the approach, ways that we're going to try to make the process easy, inclusive, and accessible. We will have a working we do have a working document to kind of track stakeholder engagement, and we plan to add to that throughout the process. So if anybody has specific stakeholder groups that you want to ensure, and maybe they might not be obvious groups, please send those to us. We're more than happy to reach out to people and add those to our list if we don't have those on our list already. And then again, kind of focusing on certain areas where we know there's opportunity for changes to be made, and those are specifically right now station locations, the routing on the north and the south ends, particularly the location of bus only lanes to a degree. Obviously, there's a lot of factors that go into that, and then the related roadway walking and biking improvements, just to kind of have that more human-centric design near the stations in particular. Mentioned the language access plan, where we'll have interpreters at all the in-person public meetings, and we'll also have consecutive Spanish interpretation at the virtual meeting. Other languages can be added by request. And then we probably will do the same process for future rounds of public involvement. And we'll also be translating vital materials into Hmong Spanish and Chinese. And this plain language review is also mentioned here. And then we kind of have some key facts about the project, which we really went over in that last presentation. And then just kind of a rough timeline. So right now we're kind of going out with the initial round of public involvement. We're doing those public meetings, but then we're also doing a lot of stakeholder meetings, either one-on-one or with smaller groups, meeting with different elected officials, with you all. And then after we're a little bit further along in the design, prior to adopting that locally preferred alternative, we'll be looking at going out again for more public involvement to just kind of show the updated version of the plans and kind of verify that before that is put out for potential adoption. And then we'll probably have additional public involvement rounds in here, but this is sort of the plan. And I think it'll also be ongoing as we move through the process. So that is just kind of the synopsis of this plan. Again, we just wanted to provide that update to you all to really focus on the goals and strategies. And if there's any comments or feedback, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
And I would like to clarify before we go to questions and comments that you are looking for a motion to approve the plan as you've presented it. Is that correct, Liz?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I think this looks good. Overall, I like it. I think it's very exhaustive and like covers a lot of the important factors here. Two questions I have. And sorry if I missed that during your presentation. Is the actual outreach going to be done by city staff, or is this going to be outsourced to some third-party consultant, like I think it was last time, or is it a mix?
It's a little bit of a mix, but I will say we are doing very much the heavy lifting on staff. So we are working with a consultant, but a lot of what we're working with the consultant on are kind of logistics planning, helping to maybe set up some initial contacts, but the majority of the meetings will be led by us, and then as well as the stakeholder meetings.
Mike, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, just something to add. For East-West BRT, we included public engagement as part of the overall consultant scope of work. For North-South, we've hired a public and a consultant for public outreach. Separate of that, our intent was to be a little bit closer to it and have more direct communication and control over that consultant. So that's a slight change between the East-West and North-South, which we think will work better. But we are having somebody help us with the logistics and everything.
Thanks, Mike. Mick, did you want to have a comment?
Yeah, only that we also have 2 outreach specialists that are actually on our marketing staff right now that we're also using, and they are attending a lot of community meetings already. And so we are giving them all this information. So that's something we didn't have with the East-West process either. So we have 2 extra marketing staff we're dedicating to that.
Okay, I think, I really like that. And are you going to use the transit ambassador, metro ambassadors, transit ambassador, what are they called, that you used for like the metro network redesign?
Probably not for this, but our 2 people that we have on staff, they're out all the time. So I guess if people want us to come visit, they can contact us and we can go out there. But our 2 people are covering it pretty well.
Okay, cool. And then the other question is about what you have on the screen right now, like the public input focused area of the location of bus-only lanes. Can you say a little bit more about what you're looking for there? Because, I mean, in my mind, a lot of this is driven, I mean, we have to have a certain percentage to be competitive for small starts funding. There's a lot of operational detail that goes into like, where do we know there are delays? And so I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, what are you trying to get from the public in that regard?
Yeah, we had a similar conversation today, and we're looking at how are we framing questions at the public meeting. So we are very cognizant of that. Obviously, we have to have that at least 50% dedicated lanes to qualify for the Small Starts program. But then, there's a lot of other factors, things like traffic, things like, just the available space. So I think, where it's feasible, probably get feedback specifically as it relates to kind of like impacts to intersections. But I think as far as pedestrian crossings and things like that, maybe where parking would be impacted, we would probably be doing some like local outreach. But I think this will probably be a lesser point of kind of public input focus area as we move forward.
Okay, yeah, I think I would encourage you to make that clear because, I think in order to have a functional BRT, you need, like, there's many things where we just need the dedicated running way. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Harold. Other comments or questions? Chris.
Thanks. I think this looks really good. I guess just flagging a couple of things that sound useful or interesting. The plain language scan sounds really helpful. I mean, I think especially as we're moving more in-house for these meetings, having the folks who are the most expert and closest to the projects aren't always the best folks for communicating. So I think that lens is going to be really helpful. I suffer from this myself. The spectrum of involvement sounds really interesting. It's not really clear how it's going to be applied and help the process. So I don't know if you want to say any more, but I'll just be interested to see how it helps inform the process. I mean, I think it's kind of intuitive to us that do this a lot, but maybe helpful to lay out and sort of maybe even map out for people in a transparent way, like, here's where we are in the process and the purpose of this meeting in these terms. I don't know, just sort of reacting, but feel free to weigh in on that if you want, but it sounds great.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think this is sort of more for our internal planning purposes as we approach the meeting, like developing meetings or developing engagement processes, like thinking about, what is the goal? Is the goal here to just educate? And I think there are certain parts of this project where there is a goal to inform. There's a process that's moving forward. So to a degree, there are parts that we are informing people about the process. And then there are parts where it's more on that consult level where we're kind of obtaining feedback, and that's sort of more like we're collecting comments and responding to those as appropriate. And then there is more of kind of interactive engagement. So there's more involving. So there's more like, not only are we presenting something, we want your feedback on it, but we're actually wanting to kind of have a much more kind of two-way conversation and actually get more ideas directly from the public. So I think it's more as we develop content for the public meetings and as we're kind of deciding how are we going to interact with people, trying to kind of keep these pieces in the back of our minds, like, okay, what's the goal here? Are we informing? Are we consulting? Or is it more of an involvement process? And how can we kind of make that more interactive?
Yeah, thanks. Just one last thought on that. Going back to some of Harold's comments, like, I think there may be an opportunity to use this to think about how we're talking, like how we're approaching a meeting. Like, we are informing people that the alignment is already determined, and we are consulting you on these pieces and involving you on even more pieces, or, something like that. Because, folks are going to show up and have complaints about the bus network redesign and stuff. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really helpful to set expectations, isn't it? Doesn't always work, but it's helpful. Other comments or questions? Okay, we're looking for a motion to approve this public participation plan as presented. Darren.
I move to approve as presented.
Robbie, is that a second?
Second.
Darren, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, just to thank Liz for doing a thorough job and laying it out. And as Harold said, it seems pretty exhaustive, and look forward to seeing how it rolls out.
Great. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote in favor, unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing no hands, so it's approved as presented. Thanks so much. I am going to ask, I had a message from Lieutenant Hannah. She has another commitment. So if there's no objection, I'd like to move to item 6 now. Are there any objections? Okay, welcome, Lieutenant Hannah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I really appreciate the flexibility in letting me go ahead here. I'm guessing you want me to try to share my screen for this?
Yes, if you can, that would be great.
Boy, let's see what happens.
Always an adventure.
It really is. Do you see that?
We do.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to skip over a part of the presentation. I think you probably can all look at the numbers at your leisure for the citations that we wrote this quarter, the warnings, whether they were hazardous or non-hazardous. So I do want to just start with our grant activity for Q3. And I just want to explain a few things about this. As I've mentioned before, we partner with Dane County Sheriff's Department, and we get the DOT grants, and we run 4 different types. There's the OWI, speeding, seatbelt, and then the bike ped. When you look at this grant, or this slide where it says Q3 deployments. Those are 21 OWI driving grants, 27 speeding grants, 7 seatbelt grants, and 7 pedestrian bike safety grants that were run in the third quarter. The citations, the next point below that talks about enforcement efforts, when it says 300 impaired driving grant citations, just to be clear, those are not 300 OWIs that we arrested. That is all of the citations that we wrote during a grant that was specifically for OWI. Oftentimes we will stop vehicles for speed infractions or going through a red signal, maybe going through a stop sign, and then you happen upon someone who is impaired, but most of the citations are written for hazardous violations. Unless you see somebody obviously who's weaving all over the road. But I want to be clear about what these are. And then the 344 speeding grant citations, again, 344 citations were written on those speed grants, the 27 speed grants. So hopefully that makes sense when you take a look at those numbers. I just want to be clear about what we're talking about here. I'll go right into the fatality crashes because unfortunately the third quarter was brutal. We had 8 traffic-related fatalities in the third quarter. Since January, we've had a total of 13 crashes that have resulted in 14 fatalities. And I'll just go and summarize each one of those. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask. I've added some information about the drivers as well, which maybe you'll find helpful. I had to do that for another group, and maybe that will be helpful for all of you as well. So the first crash of the quarter, July 18th, 6:35 a.m. This was on Highway 1218 at Seminole Highway. This made the news. You probably remember this gentleman set his business on fire on the frontage road of the Verona Road frontage road. He also happened to live there, so he set fire to that residence/business, and then he drove off on his motorcycle, got onto northbound Seminole, and then turned right onto the westbound Seminole Highway exit ramp, driving the wrong way down the ramp, if you could envision that. The driver of the motorcycle drove into the westbound traffic and collided head-on with an SUV. The driver of the SUV sustained only minor injuries from the airbag. The driver of the motorcycle was pronounced deceased at the scene. This was an intentional act on the part of the motorcyclist. He's a male white, 71 years old. He did not have a helmet. I don't have results on the alcohol and blood tests, but I know they were taken. Does anyone have any questions about that one? The next fatal crash occurred at East Washington Avenue at Egan Road on the 21st of July at 9:06 p.m. This was a motorcycle versus a pedestrian. The driver of the motorcycle was traveling eastbound on East Wash at a high rate of speed. The pedestrian was walking northbound, crossing East Washington Avenue. He did not have a light. He was crossing against the light. And just before he got to that middle median, he was struck by the motorcycle. The motorcyclist did have a green light, but again, all indications are that he was traveling very fast. The motorcyclist and the pedestrian were both pronounced deceased on scene. Motorcyclist was a male Hispanic, 21 years old. He was wearing a helmet. And the pedestrian was a male white, 69 years old. The next fatality occurred on the 1st of August at 1:41 p.m. This was a motor vehicle versus a pedestrian at Raymond and Prairie Road. The driver of a DHL delivery truck traveling northbound on Prairie Road, he was stopped at the red signal. The pedestrian was walking westbound on Raymond. She crossed in front of the truck, and it appears as though he did not see her. So he's looking left. He does make the turn, and he struck her, and she was pronounced deceased on the scene. I hope that made sense, that explanation. It was a rather large truck, and he didn't see her, but she was in the crosswalk and she had the right of way. So the driver of the truck is a male white, he's 23. And she's a female white, 7 on Park, made a left turn onto Vilas Avenue in front of the speeding vehicle. He probably did not realize how fast that car was going. So the suspect vehicle collided with the victim vehicle. The victim was pronounced deceased at the hospital. Speeding and impaired driving was the reason for that crash. The suspect was a male Asian, 26 years old. And the victim, male white, 84 years old. Just a short time later, during that same, I guess it was, now this one was the early morning, 12:25 a.m. on the 10th, but shortly after that other crash. This was West Wash and South Broome Street, motor vehicle versus a light pole. The driver of the vehicle was traveling eastbound on West Washington Avenue. Eyewitnesses say that the vehicle was traveling at an extremely high rate of speed, swerved into the opposite lane, nearly striking oncoming traffic, and then overcorrected, and the vehicle ended up going off the road and hit a light pole, caused the vehicle to split. There were 3 people in that vehicle. The driver was pronounced deceased on the scene. The 2 passengers suffered non-life-threatening injuries. Speeding, reckless driving, and impaired is suspected as the factors in that. And the driver, male black, 32 years old. And also estimated speed of at 1.80 miles per hour. Next crash would be South Whitney Way at Montauk Place, 7:32 p.m. on the 16th of September. Single vehicle crash. This was just one motorcycle. He was traveling northbound on Whitney Way at an extremely high rate of speed prior to the crash. One witness reported seeing the motorcycle flip, and another said that he saw the motorcycle hit the curb and then the driver flew off of the motorcycle and landed in the median. He was pronounced deceased at the scene. Speeding and reckless driving. He's a male white, 30 years old. He did not have a helmet on. Another motorcycle crash is the next one. It occurred on the 19th of September, 9:50 p.m. This was on Highway 30. The driver of the motorcycle was traveling eastbound on Highway 30. Eyewitnesses say he was traveling with a group of 8 to 10 other motorcyclists. They were all traveling at a very high rate of speed. The witness traveling behind the group observed one of the motorcycles wobbling and saw sparks. As she got close to the area, she saw the motorcycle lying in the middle of the road. Another witness observed the motorcycle shaking severely back and forth, which caused the driver to lose control before it slammed to the ground. He was pronounced deceased at the scene. Male Hispanic, 22 years old. He was wearing a helmet, but he had an estimated speed of 130 to 150. He was flying. The next one is a fatality crash that occurred on the Beltline. This was a motor vehicle versus a pedestrian. 11:11 p.m. on the 29th of September. The driver involved with the vehicle was traveling eastbound on the Beltline Highway near Whitney Way when she struck a person walking in traffic. The pedestrian was pronounced deceased at the scene. Of note, the pedestrian was reported to be suicidal prior to the incident, according to his family and friends. All indications are that this was an intentional act. The driver is a female white, 20 years old. She was driving home from work. And the pedestrian is a male black, 58 years old. That is a very quick summary of those 8 crashes. I included this final slide related to crashes just to show you where we are in comparison to years prior up to 2007. It's obviously quite disturbing that we have 14 fatalities this year with 2 months left to go in the year. So that is concerning. And just a summary of the serious injury and fatal crashes that have been that have occurred through the quarters since 2017. and I'll let you read this. The rest of the stuff is it's the stuff that's always in there with just different numbers to represent the third quarter. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out. Does anyone have any questions about these accidents, these crashes?
Robbie, go ahead.
I'm curious. There were a couple of instances where the driver obviously was, well, the pedestrian who was hit when she had the right of way crossing at Whitney, and I can't remember what the intersection was.
Yeah, the Beltline. That last one, the Beltline at Whitney.
Oh, it was where she was crossing and the DHL.
Oh, Prairie and Raymond. Sorry about that.
And then there was then the one where the driver was speeding quite fast down Park Street and somebody made a left turn. Were either of those drivers cited?
Yes, they will be. I don't know. The cases are still open. So I don't know what the charges. A lot of times we have to wait for blood results and all of that stuff before we send it up to the DA's office for a final charging decision. But there will be charges for both. It's just a matter of what the appropriate charge is.
But I guess I've always been a little curious. If there is a clear, say, failure to yield, for instance, the DHL driver, why a traffic citation is not issued immediately and then more charges could be given at a later date. I guess I'm just curious. I've heard this before that, there isn't necessarily a traffic citation issued right away, and I wonder why.
Right. The reason we do that is these investigations are pretty complex and require looking at cameras and figuring out physics and time and distance and all of that. And so we don't do anything until the case is completely wrapped up, because most of the time it's going to be a case reviewed by the DA's office. And so they just want to make sure that they have everything in there, including tox reports. Tox reports take a long time. You really need a lot of information before you just cite somebody at the scene for something like this. If this was just a regular crash and everybody walked away from it, absolutely, the citation would be issued on scene. The fact that there's a fatality makes it very, very different, makes it complex, lots of things to follow up on.
Okay, well, maybe that explains it, because I've heard, just offhand, that somebody got a ticket at the scene. Like somebody called me the other day and said a bicyclist was hit by, it was a bicyclist hit by a city bus, which I didn't see in the news, but somebody called me and said, asked for my advice on that, and said that the bicyclist was issued a citation while he was at the hospital. And I've heard that before, like a pedestrian or bicyclist being issued a citation, possibly failure to yield. I don't know. Crossing
Yes.
I have no idea, but obviously a citation issued right away. And then we have these fatalities where a citation is not issued right away. And I always wondered why that was.
Yeah, it's really just the fact that someone is deceased, and that raises the bar for the investigation and the level of complication on all the things that have to be put into this report for the DA's office. And yes, the bicyclist probably was cited at the hospital. We do that because they're at fault, right? Most of the time they're not like severely injured. He was probably walking and talking. And I know that seems probably a little cold, but if they're at fault and they've been transported from the scene, they're going to get a ticket.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how you know whether they're at fault.
Well, most of the time when no one is deceased, you have two sides of the story, and then you have witnesses and cameras and things that you can check. Most of the time, believe it or not, based on evidence, where the person impacted the car, all of that stuff will lend itself to being able to cite somebody on scene. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes we go back and look at things a little closer because maybe it's not so clear. We don't have to cite somebody right away.
Yeah.
There's nothing that says we have to do that. So if we feel like it's obvious and that the evidence there supports the ticket right in that moment, you're going to get a ticket. If the officer feels like maybe it could go either way, maybe I want to go back to the district station and review some city cameras, maybe that caught it, or the bus video. Buses have great videos. Sometimes they capture what's going on. So, and those folks are really good about playing video for us right away on scene. Their supervisors come out and they play it, and the officers are able to see what happens.
Okay. As I said, I just wondered why people didn't get citations immediately in some cases, and in other cases they do. So
well, hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you.
Of course.
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Horrible quarter and bad year overall so far. One question I have is about, so I'm subscribed to the incident reports where some fatal crashes are being reported, but not all of them are. So for example, that case with the DHL driver, like there was no news coverage, there was no incident report. I found it by going to community maps and being like, oh, there's another pedestrian death. And so this is a question, or maybe also a suggestion, that we should, when there's a fatality, we really got to make sure that at least there's an incident report, because I think that often drives news coverage. And from a Vision Zero perspective, if we don't even know when people get killed in traffic, then it's hard to do something about it. So how do you know, I know it's like incidents of noteworthiness or select incidents. I know it's not everything that's being included there, but yeah, fatal crashes seems like something that should go into the incident reports.
And are you talking about the things that come out looking like a press release? Are you on that list, or is it the OIC notes?
It's that 4:00 email that comes from the police department, Harold.
Right, like weapons violation, robbery.
Yeah. There's an email that goes out pretty much every day. I think it's at 4:00 with a listing of the incidents that have happened, and you can click on them and see a summary of them. And for some reason, it's not all of the things that have happened, and I haven't quite been able to figure out how they pick and choose. And that's your question, Harold. Why, if there's a fatality, why isn't it on that list?
Right.
So the information that goes into those incident summaries is put in by the officer in charge. That is the lieutenant or sergeant that's working in we call it the box. They're in charge of the city. Sometimes things get really, really hectic up there because you're running the city, right? They don't often have time. If there's nothing in there about it right away, it's because the officer who was working that night probably didn't have time to put it in the incident report. But it's something hopefully that Steph Fryer, our PIO, would follow up and put a release out. The other thing is sometimes we don't want to release information just because the investigation is ongoing. We're really, really careful about things that we release. And it's not that we're hiding anything, but we also have to maintain the integrity of an investigation and not compromise anything. Sometimes giving out information too soon to the press gets them calling all the time, and they want all these answers that we can't provide because it's an ongoing investigation. So those are probably the two reasons that you didn't get it right away. I wish I had a better answer, but it gets really hectic in the box. Phone's ringing off the hook, and there's always stuff going on in the city. And if you've never experienced it, it's absolutely absurd sometimes, some nights. So I suspect that either it didn't make it because there wasn't time, or they were waiting until they had more information.
Yeah, makes sense that things get hectic, but at some point it should happen, and that might be a good conversation. Maybe this is something where Department of Transportation can step in or something, but it would be great if you could maybe follow up on this and see what can we do. It doesn't have to be right away, but having no record at all seems bad to me.
Yeah, I could email Anne. I don't know who the best person would be to notify of this, and then she could, blast it out to everyone who's on this committee. It would be just very, very basic information, but I could absolutely let you know when there's a fatal accident. That is not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Is that something, is that what you want to, is that what you want?
Are you worried about the Vision Zero information collection, Harold?
No, I'm worried about, I get the incident report and then I see a news piece the next day, which often only contains basically what's in the incident report. My concern is that I think news coverage, awareness of people dying in traffic is really important. And I feel like if the press has no way of knowing it, it's not about me. I can go to community maps, I can figure this stuff out. But I feel like in order for the public awareness, it's important to have crash reports, incident reports somewhere in a somewhat timely manner, not immediately, easily available, because I'm sure journalists are subscribed to the incident reports and that's how they get their information. So just figuring out a way to put stuff in there.
Yes, I could certainly make a point of speaking to the folks that man that office and just ask them to put out something very, very not detailed, just to make sure that you're aware of the crash and a fatality when it occurs.
Yeah, sometimes they just put out the basic information and then they update it later when they can. So maybe that's a solution, perhaps, Lieutenant Hannah?
Yeah, and absolutely. And as much as I would love to tell you that they're all going to pay attention to what I tell them and do this every time, I know that that's not going to happen just because of the nature of that office. But I will do my best to get that information. And if I will always have it, they call me in the middle of the night about these things. So again, I can give that information to you. I can ask, when they call me in the middle of the night, I can say, make sure you do a brief release on this. That's not a problem at all. We'll see what we can do for compliance.
Yeah. I think it's what I'm hearing from Harold, and I agree, because it's very, very sad to listen to this, particularly with all the speeding and failure to yield and impaired reckless driving, is that if the public does know about it, it will hopefully cause them to be more cautious. And that's what I think we're trying to achieve. So much appreciated. Chris, Harold, was that all you had then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. I was looking through the version in Legistar. You didn't show some of these slides, but there was two different graphs that seem to show citations, and they seem to show different information. So I was wondering if you could explain that, and then I have a follow-up.
Sure. Where are you looking?
So it looks like number 5 and
slide 5.
Yeah, and then a few slides later.
And what exactly is different? So I know, and I can figure it out. I actually just lift this data from our database. This is all the dumps that go in there. So if there's something incorrect, I'd like to correct that, but I need to know what it is.
Well, they're, almost entirely different. So do you want to show slide 5?
This?
Yeah, so I think that's showing hazardous citations in red and non-hazardous citations in yellow.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yep.
And so hazardous citations going up quite a bit, non-hazardous not so much. And then if you want to jump to slide 9. So this seems to show hazardous citations going down and non-hazardous citations going up.
All right. I will take a look at that and see what the deal is. Thank you for pointing that out. 5 and 9. Copy that.
Yep. And then my question on this one would be, if this is true, what's going on? Because the Vision Zero action plan called for shifting away from non-hazardous citations. So this seems to indicate this is the first time that we've issued more non-hazardous than hazardous. And that would be, I think, a concern from a Vision Zero and equity perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a change if this is correct.
Maybe you could just look into that, Lieutenant, and maybe just shoot an email to Aiden and me, and we'll get it out to the group.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course.
So that was slide 5 and 9.
Yep, I'll take a look at those.
Okay. Seems contradictory. All right, Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly follow up on what Harold was talking about not seeing some of these reports, and also, as you mentioned, the news does pick them up, and I've read the incident reports on the police website. The news reports are almost identical, but when there's a gun incident, we hear about it. And I realize that sometimes you are seeking information from witnesses or people who might know what happened. And maybe that's why you put out a press release. But I think that it leads the public to hear about gun incidents and not hear about traffic incidents. And so they don't realize how much traffic violence there is, but they know how much gun violence there is. And I think that leads to a perception that traffic violence is not an issue. So that's all I was going to say, just to add to that, why it's a concern to not have these incident reports come out at some point, because it leads the public to not realize how important they are.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And we talk about that sometimes here too, about what incidents get the press. What's everyone talking about? It's unfortunate people seem more outraged with shots fired that doesn't hit anything than 8 people being killed in traffic related fatalities. And it's not the only thing, right? It's not, there are other crimes too that we wonder, why doesn't this get more attention? And we'll do what we can on our end. Again, it doesn't mean that there are times when I watch the news and I'm like, I can't believe they didn't report on whatever it was, and they aren't very creative because they do lift the press releases directly, and there's not a lot of investigating or reporting being done, but they sometimes pick and choose, and it's not the stuff that we would normally think would be selected, but it is. But we will do our part, and I will make sure that we get the information out about fatality crashes. I think you're right. It is important that the city realize that we have a lot of reckless drivers in this town, and our grant activity is trying to put a dent in that, and give people some consequences and something to think about before they become the next fatality crash that I talk about. Mm-hmm. So we're trying, and I will try to get that a little more attention, because I agree.
Yeah. And it's all tied back to Vision Zero, as we talked about earlier. That's our goal, to reduce serious injuries and fatalities. And, one of the ways to do that is to remind everybody, if they didn't sit through your discussion of those 7 awful deaths that we just listened to, and it has an impact if you do hear about it.
I would agree.
So other comments and questions, and we really appreciate the information. So if you are able to figure out the difference between slide 5 and 9, just shoot an email over and we'll get the answer out to everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can you wait until tomorrow?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Whenever in the next few days you can do it is fine.
I will get that to you.
Okay. All right. That's great. Other comments or questions for Lieutenant Hanna? And we very much appreciate the way the reports have been changed and focus in on the things that we're very interested in talking about. So we do appreciate that. Any last comments for Lieutenant Hanna? Okay, thanks so much.
Of course, and thank you for the catch on those slides. I'll be in touch when I have more information. If there's nothing else, I do have to sign off, if that's okay, everyone.
Yep. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Have a great night.
Thanks. All right, so we'll go back to item 4 now. That's Ben Lyman and the Metro Transit Onboard Survey Draft Work Plan Review and Feedback.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I've also got Brent Selby, who's the project manager for our primary consultant, Cambridge Analytics, is here as well to answer any questions. Brent, I don't know, we didn't really talk about this. If you have anything formal you want to say, otherwise I was just going to kind of roll through the draft work plan, much as Liz did with the public participation plan for BRT, unless anyone wants to approach it differently.
No, go for it.
I don't have anything specific formal to say. Just a small correction is Cambridge Systematics. Cambridge Analytics is something altogether different.
You are absolutely right. And I've actually corrected other people on that in the past, and I fudged it this time. Yes, you have nothing to do with Cambridge Analytics. This is Cambridge Systematics. Thank you for that. So this is the work plan for an onboard survey that will be held in the spring on board Metro buses. The last time one of these was held or was run was in 2015. Also by Cambridge Systematics, was our primary consultant on that. These are important surveys that collect vital information about riders and how the system is being used, and inform our Title VI efforts, and actually are used to define which routes are considered Title VI routes that have sort of a higher bar of analysis that is required before they are modified to ensure that Title VI populations are not unduly disadvantaged when there are changes to the system. So there are some, kind of nuts and bolts legal reasons we need to do this that affect funding and compliance with federal law, and then just operating an equitable system. As part of the MPO's cooperative agreement with the City of Madison and Metro Transit, one of the things that we take on is leading this process. So Metro is still very involved. And this document kind of lays out how that is, but the MPO is the lead. I'm the project manager on this. And then again, with Brent being the contractor project manager. So this basically just outlines what we're going to be doing to get ready for and then administer the survey. And so it's basically a blueprint and it's a reference to ensure that we conduct a successful survey. But a lot of it is that it's going to say when other decisions will be made. So in talking to Chair Kovich and gotten already feedback from some alders about the survey instrument that is in here as an example survey instrument, that's a separate task that will be addressed later. We're not setting that survey instrument now. That's just an example that is a place to start discussion. And I'm sure there will be a lot of that when we get there. So first, we develop the work plan. That's what this document is. Then develop a survey administration plan. And so there we're getting into quality assurance and quality control, the sampling plan to make sure that we're getting enough data of the riders and making sure that we're not missing particular routes, particular times of day, particular populations, and just ensuring that as the survey is being conducted, we're not only getting surveys from Route A and from white people. We want to make sure that we're getting a representative survey from all of the routes, even the low ridership routes. How do we ensure that there are enough surveyors on enough runs of a low ridership route to still get a meaningful return and result that we can then extrapolate more about the users of that route. Survey management. And so how are we going to go about recruiting and training the surveyors themselves? What are they going to need? Are they going to need access to Metro in order to be able to get their materials and get on the buses? What do they need to logistically conduct this? We had planned to do it during the winter, but as we talked to Kennedy Medina, which is the subcontractor who will actually be doing the survey itself, and we talked to Metro staff, we realized that conducting the survey in February was going to be difficult for a number of reasons, not least that riders are all bundled up and they're already dealing with their mittens and their hats and everything, and trying to pass out a bunch of paper surveys to a bunch of people who are wet and cold doesn't go over so well. And so we're bumping it to do it after UW-Madison spring break. And so hopefully we won't have to worry quite so much about the contingency plans for severe weather, but we still want to have those just in case. Task 3, again, the onboard survey design. And so actually, what is the piece of paper? What questions are on it? How is it formatted? What order are they in? To make sure that we get the information that we really need.
Alder Bennett has her hand up. Did you have a question, Alder?
Yeah, but I can wait till the end of the presentation.
Okay, that's fine.
And then clarifying, what we're going to do about limited English proficiency and how we'll deal with people who have difficulty completing the paper survey. And so, there's some of that we will still hammer out in terms of who folks can contact. In the case of people who are unable to complete the survey in Spanish, Hmong, Chinese, or English, which we'll have on board and available, we'll have some means where they can then contact me, and I can dial in language line services, and we can figure out how they can complete the survey over the phone with me or with another party. We don't expect that to be a huge issue, but we want to make sure that it's available for folks who don't speak one of those 4 languages. Task 4, recruiting and training the actual survey field personnel. This project budget and really allows, we'll see if we get down a little bit further, does allow for a very attractive pay package for these, limited term employees that, we all know that getting good staff right now, or getting any staff right now, is very difficult in just about every industry. And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to offer enough remuneration for people to see it as an attractive thing to do for a couple weeks or a month. Then actually administering the survey and making sure that field personnel are supervised, distributing and collecting completed surveys. If someone needs ASL translation, then making sure they get the resources again that I can help them with that and get the survey completed. This is the draft work plan, so it's got my notes in it to Cambridge. And so, those are things that we've already provided that feedback. And so, yep, Sun Prairie will be included. We're doing throughout the service span, not all the way up until the very late night buses. We're not going to try and collect surveys from UW riders at 1 a.m. on a Friday night. We probably wouldn't get the best results back there. And so, for the main hours of 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And let's see here. So then we get into sort of the description of the actual routes that will be surveyed. Finally, data entry and quality assurance, so that I receive the data in a means that I can do something with it and do the expansion of the data sets and be going through manually the surveys that the consultant team can't figure out what the start and end locations are. We'll take the time to go through and see if with more local knowledge we can determine what trip was being made. And then again, just sort of outlining, this is the blueprint for the whole project. And so Metro and the MPO will be providing information to the consultant team and working with them to make these decisions. So we're now at the acceptance of work plan and project administration. Well, I'm sorry, the acceptance of work plan. I think by our schedule, this will be accepted by me by the end of this month. And the process was based on the 2015 process, in which the TPPB provided input on the work plan before the project manager accepted it. And so, lacking the TPPB, we brought it to you instead. Take any comments that you have, any feedback, figure out how to incorporate that, and then move forward with a final work plan by the end of the month. Then, just notes on logistical resources and communication, who we're going to be talking to, who we're talking to about what. The names here in green are primarily they're Metro staff. And so there might be some changes there. We haven't heard back from Metro yet on who they actually want to assign to some of those tasks. And then, note that it won't be that person, it'll be someone else. And then again, staff assignments for Cambridge and for Kennedy Medina. And then we also have another sub-consultant who will be helping to actually do field management. And then we have our budget. And so here you can see on, and I think, again, this is a really important one, on the Kennedy Medina, that field surveyor being paid $46 an hour. So that's our budget for our actual people who are handing out surveys on the buses and collecting them again. So, it's a short-term job, but hopefully it's a lot more attractive than, $15 or less job. Seems like everybody these days is offering starting wage of 15 to 16, and we're hoping that 46 attracts some good folks. And then our schedule, we've modified it. We're in the process of doing a contract amendment right now to change that from before spring break to after spring break. And everybody, Metro and the consultant team, are all on board with that. And then our work plan and schedule, milestones and deliverables. And I should note that, once we've drafted that survey instrument, when we actually go out there and do the survey pretest, we'll know if we're having issues. If, say, the household income question was early in the survey, we know that we would have lower response rates because people hit that question and then they often stop. And so we want to put that near the end. And so after that pretest, if we need to, we can review and we can edit that survey instrument and then print it before we actually start the survey in the beginning of April. And then again, just a sample survey instrument, not the survey instrument we'll be using. This was drafted several years ago. And then prior to even releasing the RFP, and then we went through that process, and then we actually ended up postponing the start of this project. It was supposed to happen last winter, but we didn't think it was worthwhile to do an onboard survey a month before the network changed. And so we put it off so that it would be this winter when folks are actually experiencing the new system. So, and I haven't made any other changes to this since then. So this survey instrument is rather dated. I think I probably drafted it in 2021. We will be making some changes to it. And that is the work plan. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Alder Bennett, go ahead.
So I just wanted to check, and is the like paper survey the only way someone can access the survey?
So there will be, we haven't, quite determined exactly how this will work yet. There will be some way for folks to complete it online. However, we don't want, the point is that it is a rider survey that is distributed to people who are actually on a bus when they receive the survey. This type of survey is not appropriate to just say, everybody, please fill out this survey about Metro. This is an onboard survey where we are very carefully placing surveyors on chosen routes at chosen times in order to best cover all of our bases, and to know that we're reaching everyone who's riding and that we're getting actual rider responses. And so there will be a way for folks, if they are rushed or if they would prefer to complete it online, perhaps a QR code, and then each individual survey will be numbered, so that we're able to say survey number 10 went out on route B, and so we know who the surveyor was and what route they were on, and that helps us with our quality analysis, where then if they say, well, I was going from the mall to this school, and they don't specify what mall, we could say, okay, well, what mall is along route B? And that will help us narrow down and identify what they're intending to have said. And again, it's not the kind of survey where we just want to get everybody's input. It's very specifically riders on buses who are handed surveys.
Okay, so I just wanted to the reason why I brought that up was that I know that we're going to be handing out physically the survey, and I think you said around April after spring break. However, like if we want to reach users that are actually going to be using the buses, I think we're going to miss out on several users that only use the bus during the winter time, especially because the bus will now, like if we hand it out in April or whatever, it's going to be more spring, or obviously not going to have to deal with people cold and wet and everything. But I'd imagine that if you quite literally just put a QR code in every single bus, that at least allows someone who enters the bus at that point in time during the winter months to fill out the survey. And then maybe you could even show that maybe in the months of February to March, users are experiencing different difficulties than they are in April and May. So I would hope that there will be some ability for users to be able to like access the survey in the winter months. And further, in furtherance of that, I wonder if to capture the student audience, just knowing it, sometimes it could be harder. That is a more hard to reach population, that we could just literally have a survey available to anyone that picks up their ASM bus pass at the beginning of the spring semester to fill out the survey. So those are a couple of thoughts that I have initially.
I totally understand that. On the second point about just passing out the survey when students get their passes, that doesn't work, because we want to be surveying them about that trip where the survey is distributed. It's not how do you feel or which buses do you use on a regular basis. It's today on this bus, did you transfer to get on it? Are you going to transfer after you get off of it? And so we're not looking at every trip you make throughout the year. We're looking at on this specific trip right now, what is your behavior? What's happening? Where are you going? Where are you coming from? And certainly the other information is very valuable. There are a couple apps now that actually some transit agencies are moving to continually collect information throughout the year, and to hopefully avoid doing this kind of intensive survey. You really get very different data out of it. And maybe, Brent, that's something you could speak to, since you've run multiple types of surveys like this.
Sure. Yeah. And I will echo what you said, Ben, that this gets a particular type and quality of data, specifically regarding the travel patterns that people have. So it is a bit different to place a QR code somewhere, or to have people to ask them when they're getting the card what they intend to use it on. And there are many different types of surveys that would gather in different ways and ask different questions about how people are experiencing the bus system. I actually have a question for you, Alder, if you don't mind. I would be happy to hear about those users who are winter only that we might not be getting in April. What do you have any idea of what those users would be like in terms of their pattern?
In terms of their pattern,
like how they use the bus in the winter,
right,
as opposed to the to April.
Well, I can't speak for too many people, but speaking for myself, I guess, I had very different bus patterns in the winter versus like summer months, where let's say when I lived on campus, I could get up and at like 10 o'clock, 11, and walk into the bus stop outside of my door, and then take the bus to my class, which is about a 10-minute bus ride, or during the winter months. But during like fall or during springtime, generally I can make that walk. I know people, like, if you just stand outside the bus, the 80 at Memorial Union, and during the winter months, you'll see students getting on the bus and staying on for maybe 1 or 2 stops and getting off. Just because, like, they don't want to deal with, the bad weather, conditions. So that's what I'm saying. Like, there's people that are fine with making the walk during the summer, but plenty of people that don't want to make that walk during the winter.
Okay. That's good to know. I think that probably explains why, to some extent, why February is the highest ridership month on the service. I'm also going to add here, just as a mention, that the university routes are shorter, and we will have a second version of the survey for that shorter route, so people have, because they have less time to fill it out. And I'll throw in that people who get on for 1 or 2 stops are particularly hard to survey because they're not on long enough to fill much out.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like even if you could just take the counts, or I don't know if there's a good way to grab that information, but if there is a good way to take the counts of the people getting on the bus and staying on the bus, or and getting off, like how many stops they stay at. I don't know. That's just a thought. And then secondly, I had a second thought and now it's escaping my brain. I'm sorry. Now what I was thinking about just flew away, as it does.
As you, if you think of it, think about it for a moment, and I'll just also interject that we know that one of the groups that we will likely miss out on counting are the people who ride almost year round, ride bicycles almost year round, and that the only time that they ride their bikes is when it is -20 or when they did just snow a foot. So we know that we'll be missing those folks. However, considering how many, just the difficulty in administering the survey in February. Generally, this is done in October. But again, that was so close to rolling out the new network that people are still learning the system, and we didn't want to, be asking them about something that was brand new. And so we're pushing it out to next year to better deal with that. The overall ridership numbers, although they peak in February and March, we don't lose a whole lot of ridership by April. May and June, there's much less ridership. But ultimately, we feel, Metro and myself and the consultant team feel that overall the ridership numbers decline a small enough amount between February and April, especially the beginning of April, that we're not going to be missing that many people. Although they're, myself, I probably won't get counted. I probably won't get to fill out a survey, but I'm a choice rider, so I'm the least.
So I remembered my question. Is it that is the expectation that people will fill out the survey once or more than once, or like every time they get on the bus? I mean, and just asking because I would presume that people we might fatigue respondents if we are expecting them to respond every time they get on the bus.
I can take this one if you want. We won't be telling people to not take the survey a second time, or that's what I think we'll likely do. But it would not be efficient to keep handing the survey to the same person making the same trip, especially. So we are going to survey all of the routes, all the fixed routes, that is, and we'll try to do different times of different days to collect as many different trips as possible, different people as possible, because that will give us the greatest representation and it will give us the best rate of responses. Because you're right, people aren't going to want to fill this out 2 and 3 times, going both ways, and etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. And again, I just think that we, for capturing people in the winter months, I'm not fully seeing why we couldn't just provide a QR code or something, in every bus, or, even we could like make some printed copies and put it out. If people want to fill it out, they can during the winter. If not. But then and then doing a more intensive survey during the spring, just so we can at least capture some of the people that are only riding in the winter.
So one of the difficulties with that would be understanding what exactly we're representing. If we have the QR code out there, when we do a short focused survey, and our intention is to do it in a shorter period to keep the cost down, to get comparable numbers, and also to help to understand the context of the total ridership, because that will be one of the it's not part of this project itself, but it is essential for this data to be expanded, and that is quantitatively related to the total population of riders, so you understand how many riders are represented by each of these surveys. We're not going to be surveying every single trip on the system, so we have to make some inferences about what the information we have means for everyone that was not surveyed.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Alder.
thank you for your questions.
Yeah. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Survey research excites me. That's what I do at work too. So I was wondering about participant incentives. Are there going to be any participant incentives? And if not, why not?
No, not aside from helping the Metro get better. It's not typical to provide incentives on an onboard survey. It's quick. It's also not as onerous as say a household travel survey where you're sending something out and asking for them. It is not typically necessary, I would say, in the sense that we've done many of these, and I can't recall one that has that had an incentive. So maybe a raffle, but it seems unlikely. That would also require having to get people's information to do that. There may not be. I mean, if we really needed to do that, perhaps we would find a way to get something to people. But yeah, not really necessary, I would say, is the top answer.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I haven't done nearly as many onboard surveys as Brent has, but I am unaware, in reading the literature, I don't think that that's even something that for this type of survey, anybody really does anywhere in the country. And, when we're looking to try and get thousands of responses, we certainly can't be sending out $20 gift cards to everybody who completes one. And as Brent said, we would also then need to collect personally identifiable information, which then takes up real estate, which is very valuable on a form that we want to keep to one double-sided page, or one single-sided page in the case of the short form for UW students. And I just, I think that for something, certainly when we do focus groups, we give people a gift card to thank them for their time. This is checking a couple boxes and helping to make the transit service better through understanding its riders. One of my first jobs related to transit, I actually was one of the surveyors who rode the buses and handed out the surveys. And, generally that's not something that people even really think to ask for. They just fill out the survey and hand it back.
Okay. I mean, my experience in literature is that you get a higher response rate if you offer incentives. But I guess if you're confident that you're going to get your sample size and your representativeness, then okay. And I mean, yes, if you want to do incentives, you would obviously do some sort of raffle. You will be selected for a $50 gift card rather than paying everybody. So I'll leave that alone. The other comment was about the 9 p.m. cutoff. And I mean, it's not just students who ride the bus after 9 p.m. So at least making sure that like some of the large employers, people who work late shifts, that we're not cutting them out on the evening trips. I'm not totally sure, like at the hospital, when that would be, but 9 p.m. seems kind of early to me.
I think it coincides with when service is reduced. So that's when our 15-minute service network becomes a half an hour service network, and where our half an hour service network goes to hourly service. And so it becomes functionally a lot harder to move surveyors around efficiently and get them to the buses that they need to be on. There are fewer riders as well. That was something that Metro had set as sort of the hours they wanted surveyed. We could probably revisit that. For particular routes and areas, if there's a need to get a particular population, even within that time period, we should be getting one direction of travel for folks who are then making a return trip in the later hours. Generally, if you're getting off at 3 a.m. from your job, you're probably not going to be transit dependent because there's no bus there. So you have to figure something else out. And so we should be able to capture at least one direction of travel for those folks who work, non-traditional hours.
Right, but the point is to get information about the trip as it's happening. And so, as you said, like in the evening, it's harder to get around. You want to get data on that. So I would encourage you to revisit that, because I think that could tell you, for example, we really got to boost service after 10 p.m. because it's a real pain and riders have a horrible experience. So
we can certainly discuss that more.
All right, that's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Harold. Other comments or questions? I have one that I was talking with Ben about earlier that I just wanted to bring up, because I noticed that on page 6, it talks about that there would be no onboard surveyors on paratransit, but that the team would provide printouts of the survey to Metro to be distributed by their drivers. So I asked the question, fixed route service is very different from paratransit. So certainly some of the questions about demographics might be the same, but in terms of the type of service, it's very different. But Ben indicated, if I'm saying this correctly, that this is what's happened in the past. So I just wanted to call it to people's attention that the same survey is going to be used for paratransit. So in my opinion, we're not going to really get good information about paratransit because, again, very different kind of service where people call up and make appointments and drivers pick them up. They're not going to a bus stop and getting on a bus and riding a fixed route. So if I'm saying that correctly, Ben, I just want to call it to people's attention that there isn't a specific paratransit survey that's being presented. So if we did want to learn about how people feel about paratransit, there would have to be a separate survey constructed, which would likely cost more. I'm not sure I'm not suggesting that we do that. I just want to call it to people's attention because in my opinion, it's not really going to get really meaningful information from paratransit about their experience on the ride, because the questions aren't going to necessarily relate to them. So I don't know how other people feel about that, but I know there's been some interest about paratransit, and we're going to have an update from Metro on that here sometime in the next few meetings. And I just wanted to call that out so that people realize that that's what's going to happen. So did I relay that accurately, Ben?
Yeah, I'd like to expand on it a little bit. A lot of this type of survey, because it's conducted theoretically every few years, although it's been nearly a decade since the last one. You want to use similar enough questions that you can actually compare changes to the data and to the responses over time. And when you go and you change the entire survey instrument wholeheartedly, then that's not comparable anymore. You can't say if the new system is better or worse because you changed the way that the questions were worded. And so I don't want to say, well, we've always done it this way, and so that's how we're going to do it again. But that was the default. That was what we have done in the past, or I wasn't around for it, but what Metro has done in the past was to distribute the same survey to paratransit riders that were distributed to fixed route riders. That's certainly something we can reconsider. I can talk to Brent. That just came up in our discussion today, and so I haven't had a chance to talk to Brent or Isabel, who's the lead for Kennedy Medina, and who's unfortunately not able to join us because she's sick. But we can certainly talk about that and what that might entail. I can see benefit, certainly in removing some of the questions about transfers and how did you get to your bus stop and things like that are not relevant to paratransit. And we might be able to get it down to a single sided survey that is still getting the data that we need. But I don't want to say we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way and we need to do it this way. I do want to say we want to have good reasons for changing it so that the data can be compared over time.
Sure.
And some of the things like the gender inclusive language, that survey instrument that's in there is the old "Are you a man or a woman?" language. I should have changed it. I just put it in the RFP as an example survey.
Yeah,
I never mean for it to see the light of day in the public. And again, that was the language that was in the old instrument, so I left it there. My mistake. I should have updated it. But there are some things that we can certainly tweak, and we'll talk on the survey team and figure out how we want to move forward with that.
And there may be a better way to survey and get paratransit information. I just wanted to make sure that the TC members understand that as we talk about the plan, that the plan is to use the same survey for paratransit. And just so everybody's aware that that's what's been done in the past and that's what's going to happen here. So if additional information is needed, like, drivers being late, that's a big complaint that you always see in terms of getting picked up. So, there might be other ways to get at that information. Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, I'm going to do something that I, as a survey researcher, hate when people are like, oh, why don't you just ask about this as well? But I think this has been identified as an issue, and we should consider including a question about like the use of paratransit or non-paratransit to get at. During the network redesign, there was a lot of like, oh yeah, you may not be able to use regular transit anymore, but there's paratransit, or now we have more accessible stations, so maybe somebody who previously relied on paratransit switched to more regular transit. So if there's some way to capture that in the survey, I think that would be valuable, with acknowledging you can't put every item in there, but yeah.
Well, that might be a good crossover then, Harold. And then later on, as we're looking more at paratransit, there might be other ways to get at the information about that particular service. Other comments or questions? And if you have ideas about survey questions, you can certainly email them to Ben, or you can email them to Aiden or me, and we'll forward them to Ben. I don't know, Ben, if you want to give your email address, or we can just send it out if that's easier for people?
Mine's pretty easy. It's B for Ben, Lyman, Lyman, and I just have a City of Madison email account. So it's just at cityofmadison.com. It's a handy thing about the MPO being the umbrella under the umbrella of the city, even if we are a distinct agency. The rest of the email address is pretty easy to remember.
Yeah. And, another alder gave a lot of suggestions about the survey questions. I gave some suggestions. So Harold, you had one. If there are other things that you're thinking about, even though we're not at that stage now, it's very helpful for them to get suggestions from people about the questions. So feel free to send them over to Ben. Other comments or questions about where we are at this particular stage? I asked Ben if we were going to see the survey again before it went out, and I don't think that's in the plan, is it, Ben?
This is the one touch base that is in the contract and that was done in 2015. Certainly, if you want to, I could say, once we have a draft, before it's been finalized, even for the pilot survey, I'd be happy to circulate that and get any comments that you might have. I don't think that we bring it back and drag Brent along or Isabel along. I'd probably just say, here's what we've got for a draft, and if you have any comments on it, please let me know, and we can think about adjusting those. But
Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a question. If you are going to be able to accommodate people who may not have the use of their arms, or may have learning disabilities within the process of collection.
Yeah, there is a section in the work plan under the survey administration section, I believe, Brent, that talks about training the surveyors in how to work with and accommodate people with various needs, whether they are linguistic or just functional. I can't hold a pencil, and if nothing else, I think that what we're kind of leaning towards is that there will be sort of, I'm going to call it a business card, but bigger than a business card, that has sort of the steps to go through to reach out to me, so that I can then work with the City Language Access Program and whatever other resources I need to go and capture that information about that trip. That they'll still have that survey number that says that we know that survey went out on the E route on this day. And so we can then tie that survey even a week back, we can tie it back to that bus, and we can then work and provide whatever accommodation we need to. Clearly having one or two surveyors, two surveyors on a busier route, one surveyor on a quieter route. We want to make sure we're handing out surveys to as many people as possible. But we also, so they won't really have time to sit and spend 10 minutes completing a survey with an individual, but we want to make sure that they have the tools that we can touch base with that individual again and make sure that their voice is heard and that their input is included.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, are you interested in having the survey emailed out to you so that you can see it before it goes out in the test group? We wouldn't have to have a formal agenda item, but it could be certainly emailed around to people. Interested, not interested? Have you given enough feedback that you're fine with it at this point? I'm not seeing.
I don't think we need to see it again.
We're good? Okay,
I
we're
want to see
good.
the results.
Okay, how about that, Ben? We'll hear back from you when you have results. Alder Bennett, go ahead.
Just one last thing. I would suggest reaching out to or just sending like a general email or something to all alders, kind of just saying that what the survey is and what you all are doing here. I know that a couple alders have shown particular interest in surveys that the city is doing. So, just to avoid any other issues with alders, I would just suggest just sending a general email that this is what we're doing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, great suggestion. Other comments or questions for Ben and Brent? Okay, thanks very much. You have what you need then?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll have a good night.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for all the comments.
You bet.
Very much appreciated.
All right, so now we're moving on to item 5, Bikeways 2024. Who are we going to hear from first?
So this is Mario Galindez. I'm the project manager for Bikeways. It's 2023, but it'll be built in 2024.
Oh, okay, all right.
And so the first this project is kind of a collection of bike projects around the city, infrastructure projects, just to kind of fill in gaps in the network. So first project we're going to look at Lakeside Street between Gilson and Rowell. This is, Lakeside is kind of a higher speed street, a little, not quite all ages and abilities. Gilson and Rowell are two low speed streets that connect to sort of a larger network. If I can believe I have it brought up here. So this kind of route around the bay here, around Monona Bay here, coming down on the Brittingham Park path, going down the West Shore and South Shore drives, and coming here to connect to the Capital City Trail. And there's a nice underpass under this railroad and John Nolan. And so the idea is to complete that route, coming down South Shore, going this one block on Lakeside to come into this neighborhood down here. And to do that, we're going to eliminate parking on the south side. It's only 3 or 4 spots, bumping out the curb, but kind of leaving the existing terrace and sidewalk in place, and just getting this 8-foot, concrete cycle track in here. That involves a couple things. It involves removing this median island, and it also kind of involves, putting a little bit of separation between the cycle track and the sidewalk here with our detectable warning fields. It also, one thing that isn't depicted here, which we have added to the project, is kind of getting detectable warning fields on either side of this railroad track, which I think is very important on the sidewalk. And then as well, I think, so another thing for this project is just the curb will be slightly lower, 4 inches. So that's notable. It's just a very kind of flat area. It'll be difficult to get the grades to work, so that will be a lower curb. And so that is this project. And then the next project we will be including in the Bikeways contract is this sort of shared use path connecting Manitou Way with McCaffrey Drive along the east side of Seminole Highway. And the important thing about this one, so this is another sort of little small connection that will help fill out this commonly used, bike route around Lake Wingra. It goes kind of through the Arboretum here. So this is really a spot where we don't have any infrastructure at all. So existing conditions here, we've got a few desire paths. There's painted bicycle lanes along Seminole Highway. There's like these little dirt tracks coming through here, this little area, as you can see. And I've seen, I've been out here and I've seen people use all of these routes, including going the wrong way on the bike path along Seminole, which is quite dangerous. And even when I was out there, someone stopped and said, "Are you going to do something about this area? It's very dangerous." So I think it is something that is in high demand. It's a well-used area, and we'd like to make it safer and even more accessible. So that is that is what's going on with this one. That's the rationale. We are working with the University of Wisconsin on this project, just because the right-of-way line is right here, but we do need the path to go into their property, partially because McCaffrey is their street. It is not a city street, and also because we want to keep this massive tree right here. That is kind of a priority for us. It's very large, and we don't want to disturb it if we don't need to. And just to get our width, we would need to kind of get into their land. So this is kind of a design that we've worked with them and worked it out with what they were comfortable with. And it involves kind of going around this tree, getting closer to trying to move this stop line back as little as possible to make sure that we get some visibility for drivers here. So we think they will still have to pull up to get, fully comfortable, but we want to at least have that visibility back here. And we also wanted to make this crossing a little bit safer up here at Manitou. And so we will be putting an RFB in as part of this project. And I think, so one thing to note as well is since there was a concern at the PIM that folks are kind of flying down this hill, because there's a hill directly to the south of here on Seminole Highway, going downhill towards this area. And, there was a concern that folks, go pretty fast there, and that might make this crossing here pretty dangerous. So one of the things that we're proposing that traffic engineering is still considering is putting a radar speed sign further up this hill, just to capture some of that. And that is all that I have. Open it up to questions and comments, feedback.
Comments and questions for Mario, and Renee's here as well. Darren, go ahead.
Mario, thank you. I'm really happy to see this one along Seminole. This is right by my house, and it's an area that I use and have used those dirt paths plenty of times. So I'm glad to see that I've been able to work out with UW getting a path in there.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, overdue project. Yay, it's finally happening. While we're on this slide, I know there was some discussion, I think, about people coming along Seminole from the south and having no way to get into the ARB. And now, we have the new RFB crossing at Manitou. But, if you're walking, you walk all the way up. And I mean, people are not going to do that. People will still cross Seminole at McCaffrey.
Yeah, so our initial plan did have a crossing at McCaffrey. Unfortunately, it did seem to be sort of an issue with folks, with not only the UW folks, but also some folks at the PIM, thinking that encouraging a crossing there would be dangerous because of the aforementioned people coming really fast down that hill. And we are leaving ourselves open to that by our design here, by just doing it in a separate project potentially, but that is not something that is part of this project. So we are not doing that for now. And I think that was made clear in the PIM, and it's part of our discussions with the UW that we would not be putting that in as part of this project.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because I think there's some complication with driveways and you got to make it accessible and all of that. So I think that's fine. Just keep an eye on it, see if there's any room for future improvements.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, to be clear, it does fit with the driveways.
Okay, good. Lakeside, did you get the railroad agreed to this?
Yes, the railroad is approved provisionally, like this design. They've approved it. I think, Chris, can you speak more to that? I think that happened before I was on this project. Is Chris on?
He was. Let's see. Is Chris still here? Looks like he had to drop off.
Well, if he had to drop off, that's fine.
colleague Aaron Canton, I think.
Oh, there he is.
Can you hear me?
Aaron, is that you?
Oh, no, that's Chris.
Chris,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we can. Yep, we can.
Okay. Yeah. So our colleague Aaron was, my understanding is had this worked out with the railroad, but I don't know the exact details of it. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't see Aaron on right now.
No, he's not here. I'm just mentioning.
Okay.
He was working on this project before Mario, and my understanding is similar to Mario's, that it has been worked out.
Okay.
Good enough for me. Yeah, because I know like sometimes like the median presumably was in because of the railroad, and I know they put one in on Sherman, and yeah, but good. All right, looks great. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Harold jogged my memory about the going back to the Seminole project, about what was in the original plan I saw. I know you said that the crossing of Seminole across from McCaffrey is out for now, but we all know people are going to use the shortest distance, and for them to even go that small distance to go to the corner, they're gonna cross at McCaffrey. I mean, that's what they're used to now to doing when they come that way. So
I even got a picture of somebody doing it.
Well, yeah, and quite honestly, I've done it as I come from the south to do that, because that is the logical place to cross, and we've just gotten used to it. So I think whatever we can do. I understand people concerned about the safety, but it's even worse when cars are flying and it isn't a real crossing. Then it all gets blamed on the pedestrian that they were crossing illegally and they're a jaywalker and they're in the wrong. So I really do think we need to investigate this a little bit further, because whether we mark it or not, people are still going to cross there.
Well, it sounds like you have it on the radar, Mario, as a potential improvement for the future, but not in this particular project.
Correct.
Yeah, and I can say that, we're going to keep an eye on this. I think we would like to continue to work on this area, knowing that is a popular crossing point. It just won't be with this particular project. It'll be something that we monitor and look at how we can best implement that down the road in a safe way.
Okay, good. Other comments or questions? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Thanks much, and sorry I missed you before, Chris. Must have panned right by you with my cursor. Anybody else have any other comments or questions? Okay, thanks. Thanks very much.
Appreciate it, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Good night.
You too. Okay, so we will move on to item number 7, which is update on the 2024 Department of Transportation operating budget. You're muted, Tom.
There, sorry. So I don't think we have a representative from Metro here, so I'll go ahead and give the highlights for Metro, and then do we still have Yang and
Yes.
Stephanie are still here, so they can do theirs. How about just as a coordination issue, I'll do the slides for you while you go ahead and give yours. So let me start sharing just a second. And this is just from the Legistar file. Metro Transit, a major item is Metro is to open the Hansel in 2024. We actually need this facility because we're going to be receiving about 60 electric buses in 2024, and this is where we're going to hopefully charge them and store them. We receive bids tomorrow on this. It's been a priority for Metro for nearly a decade. Our existing facility at 1101 Hanson Road is at 125% of the original capacity. That's why we were really, as long as I've been here, pursuing another site. The new location was purchased in 2021. Maybe some of you might have remembered we were pursuing various different sites. This one kind of fell into our laps. It's the former FedEx site. The renovations have to bid. We'd like to have this completed in 24. This facility will allow us to continue growth to meet the demand from the entire region and allow us to expand service. For so many years, I'm just going to say, 2014 on, we were not able to provide service to many municipalities that were requesting service because we just could not add any more buses. The partners are increasing service. That includes, Sun Prairie and Middleton. Metro must provide staffing and support the service. The funding for this increased service will come from our partners, and it doesn't really affect the Madison subsidies. The agreements are complex and likely unsustainable. That's a comment from Justin, but I think it's really quite true. Almost anywhere else in the United States, we would have a regional transit authority to help us provide transit to these different regional partners. But instead, in Madison, because we are limited when we can't have an RTA, we have to develop an individual agreement with 13 different entities. So on that note, this is a Justin comment, but supported by many who have been watching transit in Madison for the past 2 decades. It'd be nice to have a regional solution. So what are the financial impacts? There'll be about 2.2 million increase in outside revenues. A lot of that is in revenue partner entities outside of Madison due to service increases. That includes UW, Middleton, and the like. We're projecting an increase in fare and advertising revenue of about $332,000. The cost to continue is also going up by about 1.6 million. Justin requested, Metro requested actually quite a few positions. The mayor's executive budget was granted about 6 full-time positions to reduce the overtime cost and some of the service lane and operations, as well as to operate the Hanson Road facility. So you think you have a whole new facility that needs, janitors, mechanics and that. And then also some to support electric buses. Increases to paratransit costs due to new vendor contract and high demand, about $750,000. Increases in fuel and utilities to reflect the second facility and additional miles traveled. That's $300,000. And then the cost share of a position in traffic engineering for our signal priority system. So our bus rapid transit on east-west will be implemented in 2024. We hope to have one also for the north-south. It's somewhat complicated. It requires someone monitoring that, and so this is kind of a joint effort between traffic engineering and Metro. And so that's Metro Transit. Why don't we go through all of them, and then we can have questions after that. So, Stephanie, you want to go ahead?
Sure. For the parking division, we were requesting to create one shared position. It will be with the Parks Department, so it will be a parking enforcement officer during the fall-winter months, and then it would switch over to a Parks Ranger during the summer months. We had originally requested 2. It dropped down to 1 position, which I think is a good start to make sure the shared position works. This will definitely help the Parks Department reduce their number of hourly positions and better retain staff. It also will help improve our new overnight shifts as parking enforcement transitions to a 24/7 operation year round. We are taking the parking PIO position and transferring that to under the Department of Transportation. So the PIO, instead of just supporting parking, will support traffic engineering, transportation, and parking, which will be extremely helpful for all of the different sections. We recreated our vacant GIS coordinator position to an IT specialist 2 position that will be shared with transportation, traffic engineering, and parking. We are in need of support in parking for our systems. We have a lot of system software that needs some attention. And so this position will work directly with city IT and with the departments to make sure that our projects are moving forward. We are decreasing our charge revenues by $1.6 million with the Lake Street garage closure. So that garage is set to close January 1st, 2024. Update on that, I believe the bids are due back November 5th. So we will know more after November 5th. We will also be increasing the city's towing fee that's charged to vehicle owners. So it better aligns with the actual costs that we pay to the contractor. So we entered into a new towing agreement last year, and the cost in the agreement increased, but we didn't increase our tow fee. So we are very close to finalizing that, and that will come to Transportation Commission as it's currently written. And we will be, we're expected to utilize about $4.8 million in parking reserves as our revenues continue to remain below level. We're hoping that number is higher than what we'll actually need. But as of right now, it's $4.8 million.
Okay.
And then here's a snapshot of the parking division's revenues through August of this year, just to show our the trend. We are on an upward trend, so we are higher than we were last year, August, about $900,000. There were a couple of months in June and August that we're looking a little closer into why this year revenue was lower than previous years. But overall, we are seeing revenue continue to increase as we come out of the pandemic. A couple of other items that we're working on. So we are reviewing our current rates and fees for both on and off street parking. I will be bringing that to Transportation Commission soon as we are looking to increase our off street parking rates this year or for 24. And then we will be reviewing the on-street rates and determining what we would like to do with our on-street parking options. And then the last part is we are projecting a total of $1.9 million revenue loss, and that's with the Lake Street garage closure and the Brayton lot that closed this year. So between those two, it's about $1.9 million in revenue.
Great. Yang, are you available to give this slide?
Yes, thank you, Tom. So for traffic engineering, we'll be keep maintaining 7 major services for our residents and the visitors. So those include the pedestrian and bicycle services, which kind of plays a leadership role in the general accommodations for pedestrians and bicycle issues in the city, as well as providing school crossing guard services for all public schools. We also have other services including signing, pavement markings, street lighting, traffic signals, radio communication, fiber communication, and also what we call traffic engineering services, which are providing data mapping, permitting, and also development review services, also working with neighborhoods on managing traffic issues, things like that. So definitely lots of things going on. And we also have been more proactively addressing the needs of our growing community and promoting greater public safety with a stronger focus on equity, engagement, and sustainability in the last few years. Through programs such as Vision Zero, Complete Green Streets, Let's Talk Streets, for engagement, and LED streetlight conversion project for sustainability, and encouraging multimodal transportation, supporting pedestrian, bicycle, and metro transit mode shift. So we definitely made quite a bit of progress, but there's still a lot of work to do. So we definitely increased, significantly increased the workload, not just due to the growth of the city, but also because of the higher level service that was expected and demanded by our residents. And we, listened and we provided. And also we have quite a few major initiatives going on, as I mentioned. So definitely quite a bit increase in workload. So that's definitely a challenge for us. We also face continued pressure from inflation, labor shortage, and also to some degree supply chain issues on some of the equipments that we're dealing with. Another challenge we have is the continued impact of rate hikes for electricity. So you all know that IMGE increased the rates quite a bit. Also the distribution charge. So our LED streetlight conversion project has been very timely. So we're using less energy, but still, we are, in the end, that's not enough to offset the cost increase. So that has been a challenge that we have to deal with for near future. Next page, Tom. Thank you. So we have three major position changes. So the first one, actually all the three, were mentioned by Tom and Stephanie already. So I'm going to be really quick going through them. So the first one is the shared position with Metro for traffic engineer 1 position to help sustain and broaden our work on the transit signal priority, and also support other Metro forward initiatives. So the half of the cost will be allocated to Metro, and the traffic engineering will be responsible for about $50,000 of the cost. So the second change is the second and third changes. Thanks to the generosity of Stephanie. So we need to share some of the positions within parking, with all transportation agencies. So one being a PIO position. So traffic engineering will be sharing 25% of that position. And actually, I expect that we might use more than 25% of our share, as we already been tapping into the position quite a bit previously, with Vision Zero and other things going on. We also stole the person from Stephanie to traffic engineering. So sorry about that, Stephanie. And so the GS coordinator position will be created to an IT specialist 2 position. So again, traffic engineering will have 25% share of that. So I think these 2 positions will help us to do things a little bit more efficiently in communications and also in adapt and implement technical changes. So yeah, these positions definitely will help us quite a bit. As I mentioned, that our workload increased quite a bit. One example is kind of a chart on this page showing from 2019 to 2022. Our project delivery through capital budget has increased quite a bit. Actually, more than quadrupled. We actually also pursued a budget amendment at the finance committee earlier this week. So that's to add electrician position to help maintain and install many devices that we're adding to the field to aspire to have pedestrians and bicyclists cross street. For example, RFBs and DFBs. So for our RFBs, from 2014 to 2023, we have seen a 660% increase in the number of them in the city. It has been very popular. It's been effective. So we've been installing them very quickly. And there's, as you may know, that there are still 86 outstanding requests for RFBs on the Safe Streets Medicine program. So we expect to keep adding them, maybe add about 15 of them per year. For DFBs, we saw an increase of I think 340% of them. So definitely, we're providing this devices. Folks are asking. It caused a lot of strains on our staff to maintain them. So we'll keep looking, but we're not satisfied at the finance committee because all the funds were used up before the committee were able to even to take our item because we were the last of the on the list. They arranged the amendments by agency name alphabetically, so we happen to be the last one. But we'll keep looking for opportunities to help make the growth sustainable, and also so we can keep accommodating the requests from the public. Next page, please. So finally, some kind of quick summary on other changes, and also about one supplemental request that we did get. So that's funding for a consultant to complete a state-mandated report verifying that all the traffic signals in the city are properly sequenced and work with railroad equipment at all the railroad crossings. We have quite a few of them, and this is a new yearly requirement from the state. So this is something very new, and our staff does not have expertise on that. So it's very specialized, and we'll go out for help with a consultant. So the cost will be $50,000 annually. But we do hope, after a couple of years, we will, grow our staff capacity so we can handle it internally. So I think the cost will be significantly down if we do that in-house. And we increased the electricity cost for street lighting because of rate increase. Also, we got a little bit more funding for our epoxy paper marking contract. Actually, not to do more, just to maintain the existing amount, but just because of price increase. We do have the need to actually, make the program bigger, because as we are, adding a lot of, content to crosswalks, bike lanes, things like that, through Safe Streets program, we're gonna need to maintain them down the road. But that's gonna be another topic in the future. We also received more funding for the radio communication system. as a part of a contract that we already signed previously. And we also lowered our traffic signal intergovernmental revenue by $28,000 due to staff resource limitations. And so you may know that we maintain quite a few traffic signals for other municipalities around us, and also for the state, for a county, and for UW. And we simply, don't have a staff resource to do, as much as we like to do, and as much as our neighbors want us to do for them. So another, challenge to work on the road. I will stop over there. So thank you.
In my part of the presentation will take the longest. Actually, it won't. It'll be quite quick. Transportation. I have a relatively small direct report staff, other than the 3 divisions within transportation. Key services. We manage the transportation divisions, traffic engineering, parking, and metro. We help oversee key transportation initiatives, including the East-West BRT, the North-South BRT, Amtrak, Complete Green Streets, the intercity bus terminal are examples. The changes right now, the PIO that's currently in the parking division will be transferred to transportation and serve all 3 divisions. 50% of that position will be funded as they support capital projects. The recreated GIS person in parking will be an IT specialist 2 within IT, and we'll help fund that in a very small amount. And then we have about $30,000 for a grant consultant to pursue bipartisan infrastructure law opportunities. So we've used a specific consultant who resides in DC, and they've helped us maybe capture over $20 million worth of grant opportunities. And so kind of a very small investment in the front end has been very fruitful for us in the back end. And so we just want to make sure that we have the resources that we need to capture what we can. So at that point, I think we can take questions if there are any specific questions.
Questions or comments for Tom, Stephanie, and Yang? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, just very briefly. Thanks for the overview. It's unfortunate that Justin wasn't here, because at some point I'd love to hear more about the unsustainableness of Metro and the regional arrangements, because obviously that's concerning. So I'd like to better understand a little bit, what exactly makes it unsustainable? What time frame are we talking about? And what solutions other than the things that are unlikely to happen there are out there? So maybe we can get that at some point. Thanks.
Yeah, you can. I think in one way, if I were to summarize it in maybe 5 sentences, I think Justin feels like much of our growth will occur as other communities such as Sun Prairie increase, right? And currently the way our agreements are written, so Metro has a set operating cost, right? And if one partner decreases their service, right, then all the other partners, even though they have the same service, their costs increase, right? Because this other partner is not contributing as much. And so in some ways, a certain partner can experience cost variations, even though they are not, it's not part of their decision making. So in an RTA, it's more like we're all part of a family, and we have an alternate source of generated revenue. So that's my 5-sentence summary. But that would be good. It would be good for Justin to lay that out.
I was just writing that down on our potential future agenda topics, Harold, so don't forget about it. Other comments or questions? Okay, thanks for the update. I know it's an intense process that we go through every year with regard to the budget. So just helpful for us to be up to speed as to what's happening, and we appreciate getting all the information. So thanks so much, and thanks for waiting through all the other presentations to get to this point. We appreciate that as well. So I just would like to give you a brief update on the TC social gathering. Aiden sent out 2 doodle polls, one to TC members and one to staff. We've heard back from 9 of the 13 TC members and 13 of the 19 staff members. At least that's what shows in the doodle poll. November 30th at 5:30 is the most popular date so far. All 9. Let me say that again. All 9 of the TC members are available on that date at that time. So, yay. And 12 of the 13 staff members who responded are available on that date as well. So I'm going to talk some more about it with staff on Monday. So the few folks who haven't responded to the poll, at least the TC members, I may send an email out. Aiden's on vacation, so I may just send an email out and see if I can gather just a little bit more information. But that's looking good as a date about a month out that we could get something on the calendar. So we'll try and talk some more about it next week and work out some of the logistics and then get an invitation out to everybody. Robbie, go ahead.
Sorry, what was the date that you said?
November 30th at 5:30.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. That's the most popular date so far. So that's why I want to get it on people's calendar. And I was hoping to hear back from all the TC members, but we've had 2 requests and we still haven't heard from just a few people. So we may just go ahead with November 30th because getting everybody on board, as we know, might be difficult. So we'll nail down a place downtown and get an invitation out to everybody. But I wanted to just take a few minutes to let you all know that we're moving forward and we're pretty much set, at least from my way of thinking, on that particular date. So any other comments or questions? Be great to see everybody in person. So thanks so much. How about crossover report? Anybody have anything to report to TC from any of the other BCCs that they're on? Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, BPW last week approved the sidewalks on Harvey Street as suggested by TC. There was a little bit discussion of like, doesn't TC usually really have a strong argument for sidewalks on both sides? And there was some public input which we hadn't received at the TC meeting about people speaking in favor of sidewalks on both sides. So there was a little bit of discussion about that, but yeah, in the end it was approved.
Okay.
All I have.
Yeah, it is unusual for us to support that, but it made sense in that particular case. Anybody else have any other updates for us? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. I don't have any other announcements. So if anybody else has an announcement, we'll pass right by item 10. In terms of future agenda items, Stephanie talked about parking garage rate changes. There's Mineral Point Road widened sidewalk geometry that may be coming. We continue to have the removal of the RP3 parking from Midvale Boulevard for that Safe Streets Madison project that we approved back in September. There's some additional neighborhood meetings and some additional discussions going on. So that's why that continues to be pushed out. The same is true of crossing guard policy assignments and modifications. Several items related to transportation demand management, the ordinance review and the program may be coming, if not at the next meeting, soon thereafter, along with traffic signal priority list. And there's a number of other things that we have coming in November and December that are on the list. So, and I have a separate list of longer range topics that we've talked about that people have brought forward. Harold, I made a note about regional partnership agreements being complex and likely unsustainable, and versus the discussion of a regional transit authority as a topic, and one of those longer range that when there's time we can hear from people. Are there any other topics that you would like to see added to an agenda? Robbie?
Well, you probably already have this on the list, but we were going to have a discussion at some point about the contracts with businesses for the parking garages, and whether there was a way to ask them to have TDM programs.
Yeah.
Like whether the city had any, there was a way to add it as a requirement. So
yeah, I do have that on the list, and Eric has been looking at that since they're looking at different TDM things, but that's a little bit different perspective. So I don't know if that'll come in this round, or if Eric, you'd be looking at that later on.
That's fine. It's no hurry. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't forgotten.
Yep, I've got it. Yeah, I've got it on the list. Eric, did you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say we've done some internal follow-up and clarification on that. My thanks to Chris McCahill and his organization SSTI, who've kind of helped with some policy questions. We basically think that there's a couple of changes that staff will recommend pretty quickly here. I think the November 7th is less likely, and it's more likely that will be going to the next meeting. And I know that's news to you, Ann. I was going to email you that tomorrow, but
no, that's okay. Yeah, we have an agenda meeting on Monday, so there are a couple of things that we have later in the year that maybe we can move them up, so we can try and balance out the agendas depending on what's ready.
Anyway, I won't keep us on here any longer. Ready?
Okay. Sounds good. Anybody have anything else? Okay, we need a motion to adjourn. Harold?
Move adjournment.
And Robbie?
Second.
Motion and a second, and nobody has ever voted no to adjourning. So I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote. Thanks so much, everybody.